Welcome back to HPP, the podcast that covers college basketball and the NBA draft inside and out. I'm Rich Harris, and thank you for joining us again. Today, I'm joined by Drew Barton, the Bay Area Bomber. And Drew, we had quite the break. Took an extra week. We were supposed to have 2 weeks off for the holidays. We ended up taking 3 weeks off for the holidays. So I guess I'm going to start by asking you, because we actually haven't talked about it. How was your holiday?
They were good. They were filled with a lot of basketball. As people know that are probably listening, college basketball does not sleep. Between trying to just catch up and stay up to date on games at the D1 level. The team that I work for, Menlo, we are in the throes of our conference play just started. Our guys had enjoyed a little bit of a break, but we were right back to action on the 30th, I believe. On top of our women's team, who I do some coverage for and help out, was on a road trip, literally up to the 23rd, I believe, down in Arizona. So a lot of basketball for me, but can't complain. Things have been good. I was telling Rich before the show, we're getting ready for our first kind of conference road trip down to LA. So been running film sessions all day. I'm going to be running film sessions tomorrow, film sessions in a hotel, and It'll be a fun weekend though. We're sitting at 1-1 in conference. We took the number 10 team to the nation down to the wire. Our conference is arguably the best in the country in terms of. I think at this point we have 2 teams ranked in the top 10, and I think 3 teams are all going to have all either kind of crept into the lower into the 20s or have received votes this year, and hopefully we'll be after a 13-2 record as we stand. Hopefully we'll be getting some votes. We just took out a team that made the Final Four last year.
Nice.
In our last game. So they're not as good as they were last year. Still a very good team. Still a very, very good team. They are, I would say, maybe a little bit down. I wouldn't even say they're down. Their whole starting 5 averages double figures, but it was a good win for the guys. So we're in full season. I'm just trying to find time to maybe not do basketball stuff here and there for my girlfriend's sake, but it's okay.
For me, I added the extra week of break because I actually needed a vacation from my vacation. Because the way we do Christmas, we rarely travel. Actually, I don't think we've ever traveled on Christmas. So Christmas is always here. Okay. And it's kind of like a mini little North Pole, the way we like to do it. We cut down a real tree, usually a blue spruce, 10-footer, and, have the train underneath the tree and decorations outside, inside, you name it, there's decorations there. And and my back has been really bad. And by the time by Christmas Eve, I'm not exaggerating, I could barely walk. So it took me and then we still had visiting and Christmas dinner, and so it took me days to recover to feel normal, but I'm getting back there, thank goodness. All right, so as you said, college basketball did not rest, and actually some of the things we're going to talk about today happened right after our last show, and one of those things was that the multiple-time transfer rule. That the judge who gave them 2 weeks and said we're going to put a restraining order for 2 weeks, and everyone was afraid to play because what good is this? Because if I play during those 2 weeks, then the NCAA might, penalize me. So then he extended it for the whole spring semester. So everybody who was held up by that rule is now good to go, and they've been playing. Most of those guys have played 4, 5, maybe 6 games. And some of the big names that were Brandon Murray of Ole Miss. He actually has been slow to get worked into the lineup there. Of course, Ole Miss was undefeated up until this weekend, so there was no need to rush him into the lineup. Jalen Cook of LSU's made an immediate impact. Andre Curbelo, Southern Miss, made an impact, helping Southern Miss upset James Madison this weekend. Adam Miller is added some spark to the Arizona State offense, and Raquan Battle, who actually, I believe, initiated this lawsuit, because he is Native American, and there were some issues there where he thought that he should have been allowed to transfer. And so, yeah, thank you, Raquan, and actually he had been playing lights out for West Virginia up until they met Houston.
Yeah.
So anyway, all
Did
those
he had like 30 in back-to-back games, didn't he?
yeah, Seattle was playing well, and so yeah, it was really good news. I don't know about you. I just don't understand in this day and age why we have restrictions on transfers. To me, you should be able to transfer just like you or I could go to multiple schools. Why can't they? The only thing
Yeah.
I would say is you can't do it in season. You know?
Bingo. That's my one thing is you can't jump ship mid of the season. I'm not playing now. I want to go somewhere else. Totally, like that's too far, I think. But it's like if you fulfill your season-long requirement of being at the school and you have no issues. Whether you ride the bench, you start, whatever it is, you don't cause any problems. You fulfill your year-long commitment to the team, and for whatever reason decide to part ways. I think we're just at a point now where these lines are already starting to blur. What's the harm in letting a kid want to leave? A guy wants to play at 4 schools in 4 years, fine. And the reality of it is having been around coaches in the football world, in the basketball world, D1, D2, there's already a stigma against those guys anyways. So if they think that you can just freely transfer 3, 4, 5 times with no repercussions, there are going to be some. There's going to be coaches that don't want to deal with that. So, I think that situationally, like at the end of the day, it already is going to be a hammer. It's going to hit their reputation to some degree. If they didn't cause any issues or any problems and it's not in the middle of the year, I don't really see the issue personally.
Yeah, which kind of the funny thing is Naquan Tomlin was allowed to transfer in the middle of the year.
Yeah.
And which to me would have been a no-no. Because I'm thinking even if it's some case like New Mexico State last year, where it was a total disaster, clearly, the program had to be shut down, and some might say, well, why couldn't those kids go play somewhere else? To me, sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry that your program, blew up, but it's just, how often does a New Mexico State happen? Once every 25 years or something.
Yeah. No, for sure.
I mean, I actually don't ever remember. I can't remember a team shutting down their season other than COVID. For
COVID's the only one I can think of in my lifetime.
Yeah.
At least since I've been into college basketball the last, I would say, 10 years. COVID's the only time that I can remember prior where like teams were basically shutting down, or that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, usually, what's happened is even if you are facing sanctions or whatever, like Oklahoma State did, a few years ago, it applies. There's like a certain time frame, even if they make up their mind in the middle of the season, they don't make you pay that penalty that season. It usually happens the next season. So, but anyway, so speaking of Memphis, Naquan Tomlin is playing for Memphis. He's doing well, but there's a lot of other pieces being juggled around there. So Memphis freshman Mikey Williams and his buddy, and they are buddies, JJ Taylor, because Taylor was living with Mikey Williams when he decided to, shoot at that car. Taylor, a couple of weeks ago, got suspended for unknown reasons, and they both decided to transfer. So if anybody wants those two knuckleheads, they're in the transfer portal. Yeah. What a pair. Interesting.
Power to you.
Yeah. Interesting. I don't know what to say. I mean, Taylor wasn't that highly regarded. I think he may have been like 99th. I don't know. He was a 3/4 star somewhere in there. But I don't really think, honestly, I don't think either of these guys are ever going to make it to the NBA.
Nope. I think Tomlin ending up there was the nail in the coffin for particularly Taylor because they're both kind of in that forward area. But Mikey never even formally joined the team, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think he ever
wasn't allowed to.
Exactly. I don't even think he ever formally was there in any way, shape, or form.
Well, no, I think he was enrolled. I think he was an enrolled, but I don't know if he was allowed to do anything with the basketball team.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think he ever was, for all intents and purposes, he wasn't on the team anyways, more or
Right.
less. And then Taylor, like you said, wasn't a highly touted guy for a team that is, looking to make some serious noise, and then brings in an accomplished, proven player in Tomlin. JJ Taylor was never seeing the court, and if anything, he was going to be a guy that was going to be not going to find any groove until he was probably an upperclassman. Anyways, I didn't see anything. I think he played 6 minutes. There's nothing I saw from him being out in California in high school, and I don't follow grassroots high school basketball super intensely outside of probably the top 100 kids, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing there that I thought like, oh, this kid's going to be ready to make an impact quickly. I mean, he would have been a guy that would have probably been in college for 4 years for sure, maybe even a fifth, and have been at best a second unit member playing 8-10 minutes a game by the time he was a senior.
And he's already been suspended.
Yeah, and that's not even touching all that. I'm just saying as a player.
First of all, he wasn't involved in the shooting, but the fact that he was friends with Mikey Williams is kind of makes him a little guilty by association. And then they get suspended, on top of it at Memphis, where they already take a bunch of malcontents and troublemakers. I mean, for them to suspend you, that.
Well, I think part of it too is they're like, you're not good enough for us to look the other way. Like, I'll look the other way for a Jalen Duren type player, but you are the last guy. If you're the 15th man on that roster, you do not think you have the same leash as, a Tomlin or a Duren when he was any of guys of those caliber. Like, do not think for 1 second if you're the last guy off that bench, coaches have to treat everybody fairly, but they're not going to.
Kansas State didn't give Tomlin much of much leeway. I mean, they came down pretty hard on him for sure for the trouble he got into. So.
I feel like that's the type of coach that Tang is, though. I feel like Tang is very much so like I'm not, I feel like he is. We talk a lot about coaches, obviously with the Alabama situation last year, and was it New Mexico, all those schools we talk about a lot, but there are coaches, and I think Tang's on the other end of that spectrum where it's like program first, we'll figure out the basketball because the program is going to be solid foundation on the program side. The basketball side will figure itself out. So,
right. One more Memphis note, because the Jordan Brown story is never ending because, at first he disappeared. He wasn't showing up at games. Everyone thought he was leaving school, but he's a super senior. He's a graduate senior. So I don't know if he really had any more options. Like, I think since he had already played not a lot, but he played enough probably to have this season count. So I don't think he can go anywhere else next year. I think he has to. He's done.
Yeah.
And then Penny said that he was out because he had an illness, but that was like a month ago now. But Penny's still saying he's on the roster, but he's not saying what's wrong with him and why he's not at games. I mean, the only thing you could think of is, he's got to be pretty damn sick. I don't know, but you think that they would be a little more forthcoming if he was. I don't know. It's an odd situation, but it doesn't look like right now. I think it doesn't look like Jordan Brown's going to be playing much, if at all, for Memphis, and then we'll move on into the draft. But a former McDonald's All-American, he's probably not going to get much of a look. All right, moving on. More trouble off the court is Terrence Shannon. I guess this happened about a week ago. It came to light. Yeah. And they've used the words rape. And if you read the court documents that came out yesterday, it's not like Interior Morris at Kansas kind of rape. It's something that happened at a bar, and where he kind of reportedly or allegedly groped someone, but more than just groping. Use your imagination. but so it's not what I would, when you think rape, you think of, kind of like kidnapping, this is more like, I don't know. I don't want to get into the details and upset people, but this to me doesn't, it's not what I imagined once I read the court documents. So what did he do? Apparently there's not really, it's going to be his word versus her word. And she didn't even know him by name. She identified him by photos. And so apparently it's like he said, she said, and so he's like, no one, there's no proof that I did anything. So why did Illinois suspend me? And so he filed a court action against University of Illinois so they would make him allow him to play. And then today they in turn filed some kind of thing so that's going to go to a federal judge. And the judge had to recuse himself for some reason. So they say that it may be by the end of the week, it may be cleared up whether he's going to be allowed to play until this thing is settled. But my gut after reading all the court documents and news stories is that I don't think this is ever really going to come to much. I really don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw, I think I sent in our group chat the original, like, because I saw the news and just like you, I saw, and I mean, like, you see the headliner is so like, oh my God, like I mean, it literally was like, alleged rape and everything. So I haven't followed it as closely. I've just been very busy. But I did look, and I mean, not to make it light of anything. I mean, you do not have a right, no matter how big of a star you are in anything, particularly in athletics, to treat people that way. But I do think that it was a little bit misleading. I think like the original like posting and kind of was like, oh yeah, this dude's done. Like screw this guy. This guy's a terrible human being. Still not at all, but like there are levels to it. Like you said, the Arterio Morris situation was a much different ball game than this. But I don't really know where this is going to go, because I mean, if he still came out and still acted on these behaviors that are being alleged against him, there's still no excuse. There's still no, I mean, still
Right,
terrible, and you still deserve to be punished.
the penalty apparently is a minimum of 12
Yeah,
years in
yeah,
jail for
yeah.
something that apparently was kind of like, two people crossed paths in a bar and it happened in a matter of minutes. Everybody's clothes were on.
It'll be very interesting to see where this goes, because like I said, I haven't followed it closely enough. I don't, I'm not going to take a side. I'm not versed in this nearly well enough, but it's just like, I mean, it's a shitty situation all around that somebody would have to deal with this, that it's happening to, a star in college basketball. Like, it's just a shitty situation. So, it's one of those things until there's a final verdict, final, process being handed down. You just kind of got to sit back, buckle up, and kind of see where it goes, I think.
Right. So more off the court trouble. Pop Isaacs is being investigated for an alleged sexual assault on a quote unquote minor. Now, this was at the Battle of Atlantis when he was there. The age of consent there is 16 in the Bahamas. I think it's Bahamas, right? And she was 17, but apparently she had been drinking too much. And so her lawyers are saying that she really wasn't in the state of mind to be able to give consent. Now, why her age comes into play or not, I don't know. I don't know any more about the story. I don't know if this is like running, two drunk people running into each other and doing, what that they did, or, that's one type of scenario. Another type of scenario is you take somebody back to your hotel, you get them drunk on purpose so you can take advantage of them. I don't know, right. Or something in between. I have no idea what it is, but Texas Tech must feel confident that Isaacs is in the right, because he continues to play and there doesn't seem to be any danger of him not playing. By the way, this is a civil lawsuit. This person is not trying to have him charged with anything legally. So she's
Right.
just the lawyers are just trying to get money. So, which already makes you kind of skeptical, you know?
For sure.
All right. So more bad news. Trust me, there is some good news here, but it's going to be a while. Well, we started with the good news, the 2-time transfer rule, but Providence last week lost Bryce Hopkins to a torn ACL for the season. Providence was looking like a tournament team. I would say they were right there with Villanova and Seton Hall, right behind the top 3 in the Big East. And they had just beaten Marquette. Losing Hopkins is a big blow, I think, to this team, and they're going to struggle. I mean, we know Creighton, Marquette, and Connecticut are in the tournament. Villanova probably in the tournament, and then there was like, is the Big East going to get a 5th or 6th team? And we were looking at Providence, Seton Hall, Butler, maybe Xavier. And so if the Big East only gets 5 teams, Providence is might struggle to be that 5th team.
Yeah, I think the last time we talked about Bryce, I think it was on I can't remember if it was stock buying or selling on the stock.
Yeah.
And I know that if I remember correctly, I had said that I was kind of more in the selling range just because I think he's a really solid college basketball player, but I just haven't seen, there's been no real growth. Like, I mean, you can pull up his stat lines from this year and last year. I mean, they're almost identical, and the 3-point shooting is significantly worse now. And we're enough into the season where it's like a legitimate concern now. It's not a 4-game sample size where it's like, it's a tough break. I mean, he's shooting under, last I looked when I was looking, making notes, like 20, he's at like 20% from 3. And I mean, he was at least at a respectable 36 last year. But yeah, like for a team that was kind of on the outside looking in on that bubble, I don't know how you replace 15.5 points and 9 boards a game. Like, and again, deep enough in the season, right as conference is hitting, just as you were building momentum, you take down Marquette, who they've had some struggles recently in terms of just winning games. But it's like, that's a lot to overcome. I mean, this isn't a, 6th man off the bench who just kind of was a spark plug. I mean, this was your statistical leader, so this,
and Providence isn't deep.
like,
some teams could afford to do this. Some teams
yeah,
have the depth that could absorb this injury well, I mean, okay, we're talking about an all-conference player here.
yeah, we're talking
and
about
by
the
the way,
guy.
when we talked about him early on, he had since been playing a lot better.
Yes, he played well against Marquette. I saw
so
that
he was
game.
probably headed toward being an all-conference player again.
Yeah. No,
And
I mean, you're missing your leading rebounder.
Providence just doesn't have the options off the bench to replace him.
Yeah, I pull up their team stats right now. They have 3 guys in double figures, including Bryce. And you're now down to 2. Now, somebody based on shots, somebody will, I know, I think what's his name, Gaines,
Gaines, yeah.
Yeah, his scoring will probably uptick. He's at like 9 a game, and I know that Jaden Pierre was at like 8 or 9 a game. So their scoring will go up, but it's like now you're bringing in more guys that weren't in the rotation, have to absorb big minutes. I don't know. This might be a little.
Well, the
this is
other
probably
thing
too much
is,
to overcome.
he was their best inside option.
Yeah.
Their best mid-range and interior option. Plus, he gave you a lot in terms of rebounds.
Yep.
That's all gone. And anybody that they bring, off the bench, I just don't think can fill that type of role. They're going to be like, even Ticket Gaines is probably about the same height, but he's built much differently. He's more of a perimeter player. Just don't see it happening. Another player lost for the season is Houston's Terrence Arsenault. And now that happened soon after our last episode. So he's been out for a while. And the thing about Terrence is he was probably headed to being talked about in our stock report as, who's cold, because he really hadn't made the strides that we expected from a top 40 recruit who had a solid freshman year, and we could see the exceptional athleticism, but wasn't quite all clicking on the court. And this year we all expected him to make a big leap, and he didn't. And he wasn't getting a lot more minutes. I mean, in fact, he may have been getting less minutes this year. So they lost him for Achilles tear again, bad injury. I think Houston's going to be fine because they really weren't relying on him a lot to begin with. I will say, for his draft prospects, obviously you don't want to tear an ACL or an Achilles. And it's going to be a long road back. And so wish Terrence the best. Obviously he's going to be dropping on our draft board for multiple reasons.
This one hurts because we had him in a stock, and I actually said that I think we had him in like a buying sell, and I think the general consensus was he was cold, but I was buying because I was like, there's not really anywhere else for him to go but up, and I was like, he's not going out to the draft this year, so I'm hoping junior year. Third year is kind of for these bubble guys, like the third year is kind of the make or break year. Like now you're the upperclassman, you're probably starting if you've been in the system now. But after this, it's like Achilles are the one injury in basketball that it's so hard to come back from. I mean, it's just like if this impacts his athleticism at all, where he's not the same athlete, we know he's not the most skilled scorer. He's not a passer. He was a solid rebounder. I know he played well against like Jackson State and Rice, which doesn't say a lot, but he does have the ability to be a good rebounder. But now it's like if his athleticism drops by just like 20%, 15, 20%, he's just not as explosive. You're like, I don't really now I'm concerned. Now I'd be in the selling category. Like it's not like it's a shoulder injury or like a broken hand or wrist, where it's like obviously those suck and those can put you out for a while, but we're talking about a guy who I scouted him in high school, actually. Funny enough, I went back and read the report, and I said in the report that I did, not the most skilled player, but he's going to the perfect place for an athlete like this, where at a minimum, Sampson has the ability to take these tools and turn him into an elite rebounder, elite defender. And that was where I think his bread was going to be buttered, and then hopefully the offense would come along as to some degree. Now you have an injury that is notorious for sapping athletic ability. I mean, if he is 20%, 15, 20% less explosive, less athletic, that hurts him substantially. Kevin Durant tore his Achilles. Kevin Durant is supremely skilled. There was not too much of a fear that his jump shot was going to be there. He might not rack people and dunk on people, but he's still going to have a bankable offensive skills. Now you're talking about a guy where it's like, if your lateral movement and vertical movement.
Yeah, he's athleticism first, not a ton of skill yet.
Yeah. So you hope that, I mean, the good news is, and I think, we kind of hinted at this last time we talked about him, is he needs to come back. Now he's for sure going to be coming back. There's no shot I see him even sniffing any sort of draft days, because the last guy that was in a similar situation was Jalen Clark with UCLA, but that was a guy with a proven resume before his Achilles.
Exactly. Right.
Prove it like he was.
Who was in the running for Defensive Player of the Year nationally.
Yes. Like weird. So we were talking about a guy who had proven I'm a much more complete basketball player, wasn't an elite offensive player, but I still think averaged like 12 a game. Like there was something there where was a guy that we haven't seen yet.
He had made strides in his last season offensively.
Totally. So, it's hard to put a positive spin on an injury like this, but hopefully Arsenal is able to take this. You never want to see a guy get hurt, especially a talented guy on a good team. You want to see him get healthy, get right, and hopefully use this as an opportunity to maybe sharpen some other skills, come back and realize that, hey, I know what people are saying about my potential, but I might be better off being a 3 or 4 year player, especially with this kind of injury. And I think that would be the best route for him at this point.
Here's the thing. Alan Flanagan played for Auburn for 4 years. Now is using...
Got him on the show.
Exactly. And his last season, now he's spending at Ole Miss. He was having a tremendous year, was on many, many draft boards. A lot of people considered him a late first rounder, certainly a second rounder. Then he suffered the Achilles injury. He came back about halfway through the next season and it wasn't anything like himself. Last year, he was a little better, but still really wasn't. It wasn't the Alan Flanagan of old. Now, this year at Ole Miss, he's looking like an all-conference player, and he's launched himself back in the draft board. But we're talking about a year and a half,
for a player that was better.
Or 2 years. For a player who was, yes, definitely better than Arsenault. Not Arsenault's better athlete,
Yeah,
not a tremendous amount. But Flanagan's now doing it a lot with skill too. You know,
exactly. But like you have a player where it's like Flanagan again, when he was at Auburn, you were like, there's bankable, tangible things that I like that I'm seeing it. I'm not imagining what it could be. It's like I'm seeing him produce.
right.
So for a guy that we are having to still kind of imagine what he could be,
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing that's where I'm more worried. If
Right.
Arsenault was averaging, if he was putting up Dillon Mitchell defensive numbers and like defensive impact and rebounding and then got hurt, I'd be a little bit more like he'll figure it out. But it's like I was hoping he could get to that level, thinking he could get to that level. He didn't and then got hurt, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Right. But I think what he's looking at is probably next year is going to just be like getting, his feet wet again. He'll probably won't, come back. He'll probably maybe come back around the beginning of the year about conference play. I'd say about, a year from now. And he'll probably, I'm guessing, I'd be amazed if he was close, to what he was. And then I think the following year, his senior year, is when hopefully now for Flanagan, it took him another whole year. So
Did Arsenault redshirt last year?
he did
No,
not. He did not. And I don't think
that's
he doesn't get the COVID season either. So he only has 2 more seasons. But I don't know if he can redshirt this year. He might be able to redshirt this year, but I don't know. He may have played too much. Um,
would he potentially be able to redshirt next year? Take like a medical, like just
yes,
like
yes.
right? Because
And that right, yeah, that might make
I
sense.
would maybe recommend that, to be
Right.
honest, as somebody who's now working more in the basketball lineup world now that I'm, running operations, just
Mhm.
to what I've talked about our coaches and stuff is like you have that 1 year, everyone it's so your redshirt freshman is like the famous one. You're a redshirt freshman, that's what you do. But I'm like, dude, if you have that in the chamber, use it.
Yeah.
Use that. Because
And
I think
yeah.
it's universally 6 games, which he's played more than 6 games. So I know at the NAI level it's 6 games, and I believe it's 6 games at NCD2, which would
I
mean
think
it's
there's
6 games.
some leeway. I think you can appeal.
Yeah, but he definitely played in more than 6. Like he was well over
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So it's like maybe you can skimp it by like a 7 or 8, but he played in the game he got hurt in. Like he still saw action.
Hmm.
He played about the first 10 minutes of that game and then got hurt, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm just saying redshirting should
Right.
still be an option for him. I would use it.
Yeah.
Save the
Yeah.
year just to get
If he's
healthy.
on the same trajectory as Alan Flanagan, yeah, that would make sense because
Yep.
Flanagan really wasn't close to himself that first season back. Second season, still not there. All right, so
Yep.
we'll move on to some recent trends and observations. And I'm gonna ask you some questions, and we're gonna talk about. We're almost at the halfway point. You realize that?
That makes me so sad.
We're almost at the halfway point. Most teams have like 13, 15 games under their belt. So,
Yep.
and conference play is just starting. Most teams will play about, I guess, about what, 18 conference games.
Give or
So
take, yeah.
yeah, so we're close to the halfway point. So my first question to you is of the top teams ranked in the top 10, and I'll read them off for everyone. We'll use AP poll. There's AP and coaches poll are very close. So yeah, we'll run into a little trouble toward the end, but you can use either poll, but I'll just quote the AP. Purdue 1, Houston 2, Kansas 3, UConn 4, Tennessee 5, Kentucky 6, North Carolina 7, Arizona 8, Oklahoma 9, Illinois 10. And I believe that's the same order, roughly, yeah, the exact same for the coaches poll. So of those teams, what teams do you think are not Final Four worthy? Now, you only have to pick one. So yeah. But if you have more, you can say them.
So this is gonna probably sound like a little. This might be like the hot take here is I really like Houston. I love Samson. I love the fact that they're super defensive minded. I just I don't know. I know they're the last undefeated team.
Yep.
I don't think they played anybody outside of. Did they beat A&M? I think they beat A&M.
Yeah, they beat Texas A&M.
Who's receiving votes, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. Yep.
But that's about it.
Yep.
And we've had this question with them year in and year out, more or less ever since they kind of really hit their stride about 4 years ago. Can they score enough in a 6-game setting as the competition gets harder on neutral courts with games coming fast and hot and heavy to win at all, or at least get to a Final Four? And maybe I'm trying to be way too logical here. I'm not, maybe I'm going more analytics, less eye test here. I don't know. I think that this is I wouldn't be shocked if I looked up and saw them in the Final Four because they defend, they do have some players. But if you take LJ Cryer out of this equation at any point, what is their offense?
Right.
To the point where it's this offense is it's very reliant to one guy.
Yeah.
And it's I look at their resume and I'm going to pull it up just to kind of see. And they beat Utah by 10. Utah's been solid win. They beat Dayton pretty handily, 69-55. Again, solid win. They beat Xavier by 6. Okay. And then they beat Texas A&M by 4, which is probably their best win of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know their conference is about, they're in the Big 12. That conference is absolutely loaded. So we're going to find out
really
a lot
soon.
about
Starting tonight, actually.
They're playing Iowa State right now.
Yeah, no cheating. No cheating. We're going to make our pick.
No, yeah. I'm just saying they're playing Iowa State. That game is on right now, I believe.
Right.
And I'm we're going to find out a lot about this team. I think they're made of the right stuff. I think they're super tough, but I think they are limited. And I think we see this same song and dance with these super defensive-minded teams, Virginia, Tennessee. Houston's kind of entering that category where it's they could make a run. Nobody would be shocked. But I feel we constantly, with these types of teams, are always man, the Sweet 16s where they capped out. Oh, man, the second round, really? And I think a lot of that has to do with they're just very one-dimensional. They're very elite at one thing and not very elite at the other. On Ken Palm, Houston is number 10 for adjusted offense. So they are supposedly a top 10 offense. I don't believe that. I think, again, they have not played a schedule that is, they have not played a very good strength of schedule. Ken Palm's strength of schedule metric has them at 228th in the country. And when you look at the other teams that are right behind them, Purdue is 3rd in strength of schedule, 5th in strength of schedule, and Arizona is 15th. So those three have played people. So Houston's kind of my hot take answer because I don't know if they have enough in the offensive tank to really get there consistently. And if anything happens to Cryer, I go from concerned to DEFCON, whatever it is, 5 or whatever. So we'll just do one because we could talk about, a lot of these teams and there's teams with injuries and whatnot. But I feel that's the team that I would say I want to be wrong, but I don't think I am because I think history sides with me on teams that are of the Houston style.
My hot take would be Kansas. Because I agree with everything you said, and I think I kind of like Kansas, head-to-head neutral court. I think I like Kansas a little better than Houston, but I'm really worried about Kansas's depth, though they do have some youngsters that really haven't stepped up. But even if they did, they still only go about 7 deep. So yeah, I just think Kansas is really playing with fire here. And they're one injury away from being mediocre. But I think the obvious answers for both of us was Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma is just not the 9th ranked team in the country. They're just
I thought that was the cop-out answer, to be honest. So I didn't want to just be Oklahoma because I think you just take a glance at that board and they're very clearly the outlier. They're playing good basketball, and that's where I think the poll becomes, it's tough because it's a power ranking. You're rewarding the hot team right now, but I wouldn't be shocked if you go down the list and look at a Creighton or a Marquette or a Baylor or hell, I'll even say an FAU or a Gonzaga who are kind of doing this all year long, could beat them, and I don't think anyone would be shocked. Whereas if those teams went in and beat a Houston or a Kansas, you'd be a little bit more like, whoa, didn't see that one coming. But
Yeah,
Oklahoma was my
I,
like obvious.
I think at the end of the year, if Oklahoma's not in the top 25, I'm not going to be surprised.
No, not at all.
I just, I think they're a good team. But we'll find out when conference play really kicks in and
I think I picked them in an upset last week just to try to pick up some
yeah,
points there.
you picked them over UNC. Yeah.
Did not work out for me. I thought maybe
No,
I could sneak one.
no, they
Bad
weren't even
call.
really competitive in that game.
Nope. That was enough. I saw enough. I was like, you betrayed my trust. I now root against you. I don't actually root against you. They are playing good. This is not to say that they're not playing good basketball, but over the course of a full season and then into a tournament, there's no way that team, in my opinion, it's like very obvious that there's, for those of you listening who knows, it's like the old meme of like all the military soldiers in a line, and then the guy at the back of the lines is like wearing a clown costume. People will get this reference. Trust me, if you're listening, there's like a meme, a picture. That's a harsh way to say, but that's kind of where they're at. I'll find the picture for you, Rich, so you have context.
The other team, I think is could go either way is Illinois, and that to me, with Shannon, they're probably definitely a top 20 team. Without him, I think they could finish, sixth, seventh in the Big Ten.
Sure.
And we've already seen that starting to show up, since Shannon's been out. So, yeah, I think Illinois also, without Shannon, is not a Final Four team. All right, so now I'm going to turn it around the other way and say, of the teams not ranked in the top 10, but are ranked 11 through 25, who do you think is a Final Four contender? So I'll read off 11 through 25. We got Marquette, Duke, Memphis, Baylor, Wisconsin, Auburn, Colorado State, BYU, San Diego State, Utah State, Clemson, Creighton, Gonzaga, Florida Atlantic, and Texas. Now, if you go over to the coaches poll, they don't have Texas, they have Ole Miss, but they otherwise have the same teams. So you can use Texas or Ole Miss, either one, as if you think that they are a Final Four contender. I think there are several. You could pick more than one, but you give me at least one.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the thing about college basketball is like odds are there's going to be one or two of these teams that make it there just because they get hot at the right time.
But I mean, we're talking, have the talent to be a Final Four team.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going talent, I think like they're right on the cusp. Like those Marquette Duke teams, I think they're right there. I mean, Marquette has not. They looked awesome to start the year. I had them as one of my best teams in the country early on. I had them, UConn, and Arizona as my top three early, like when we were doing all like the Thanksgiving tournaments and everything. They looked awesome. They've struggled, but I mean, that is a team that is talented. That is a team that could get on a roll at any point. I mean, the Big East is no joke. Like their conference play is tough. To expect them to not lose any games when they have to deal with like Creighton, Providence, like teams like of that caliber, Villanova, Xavier is a little crazy. And Duke, I think like there's a reason they're 11 and 12. Is from a pure talent standpoint. I mean, Duke was preseason number 3, I believe,
and preseason number 1 in our poll.
Yeah, so like that team is loaded. Again, they're kind of, I think, relying on that top half of their roster to do a lot of the heavy lifting. And I know we'll get to Proctor later. He's going to make an appearance here in a bit, but like they're talented. I think Memphis, and I like this Baylor. I like Baylor. I'm looking at this team. I like this Baylor team a lot. I think I talked about them before. I just think that this team is they're deep. They've got guys that kind of do a little bit of everything. Like they have guard play, they have bigs. I know when Cam was here last, he talked about Yves Misi as a guy that he really likes. And I hadn't seen them play up until a couple of weeks ago. I really watched them play. I know they lost back-to-back against Michigan State, who is I don't know what to think of
They
that
just didn't
team.
show up. They didn't show
They
up.
didn't show up, and they lost to Duke, but that was a competitive game, if I
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
correctly. They
yeah.
were very so. It's like I think to stay away from the two teams that are right there at 11 and 12 to the end. I think this Baylor team is super deep. They've got like 6 guys all averaging in double figures. I think they're athletic. I think Jacoby Walter and Ray J. Dennis have been really, really good for this team. They're both shooting the piss out of the ball from three, statistically at least. So I'm going to say Baylor. I think that their 2 losses, one you kind of write off is every team has one of those ones where you're like, what happened? I mean, Purdue lost to Northwestern. And then the Duke game, if I'm not mistaken, that game was in Duke or at Duke. That's a hard place to play, man. I mean, that they took on that challenge and gave them a good run. So I'll take Baylor as my not as obvious team, but I think that Marquette and Duke talent wise, don't be shocked if they get hot and make a run. They have the talent to do it.
Right. I think to me, the answer to this is obviously Marquette. Just Marquette. To me, they stand out among all the rest.
For sure.
Then to me, for my second choice, would come down to probably Duke or Creighton. And I don't know who I like better out of there right now. I mean, Duke's got better depth, but they don't look very good at time. I mean, watching them against Notre Dame, oh my God, was that awful?
That was not good basketball.
No. And in Creighton, it's always the depth, and they do have these moments where they perplex you. Creighton does. So I like your Baylor pick. I'll make a different one, and I'll say Wisconsin. I just think this Wisconsin team still does all the right things, and they have AJ Storr, who's a bucket getter. They have Stephen Crowell, who's an underrated center who can shoot the lights out. And they have unheralded freshman John Blackwell, who's been a huge surprise for them. This Wisconsin team can score points. They were one of those teams, just like Houston, that I would always avoid in the NCAA tournament because one day they're going to put up 50 points and somebody's going to score 51. And I don't think you can count on Wisconsin doing that anymore. So yeah, that would be my real dark horse. And I probably favor Baylor a little more than Wisconsin. So we're probably in Memphis. Memphis is another team,
Memphis is scary.
Yeah.
From a purely athletic
with Tomlin there. Yeah.
Yeah. They're a team that I'm just hesitant because there's always that is all the outside noise and all this, like I said, the malcontent, is that team going to snap a little bit at any point? But from a physicality, athleticism, they are super talented. But I just don't know if I trust them mentally in between the ears to kind of stay focused. There just always seems to be noise around Memphis. There already is. You have Tomlin transferring in the middle of the year. You have Brown. Nobody really knows what he's doing. You have two fresh, small stuff like that adds up.
Always something.
But
and you know what? It's their fault. They're the ones who bring in all these kids, some of which have questionable backgrounds. So
for sure,
they can't blame anyone but themselves. All right, so now we have a real tricky question of all the ranked teams, and I'm going to bring up who I think, and a lot of these teams, or most, if not all of these teams, are getting votes right now. But of all these unranked teams, give me one or two that you really think, by the end of the year, these teams are going to be top 25 teams, no doubt. And I'll give you off, my list of the best of the rest. So that'd be Dayton, James Madison. You may have another team that I didn't list, by the way. So I'll start over. Dayton, James Madison, Grand Canyon, Indiana State, Princeton, Nevada, New Mexico, Cincinnati, TCU, Texas Tech, Iowa State, Miami of Florida, Wake Forest, Utah, Oregon, Ohio State, Florida, Mississippi State, South Carolina, St. John's, and Seton Hall. I think we just named the rest of the bracket. So who do you like? Give me a couple teams out of that list that you think are definitely top 25 worthy teams.
I'm going to start off with, you have them here. They were the first team to miss the 25, and that's Dayton. I think they are playing just really good basketball right now. They don't have, in terms of wins, they don't have maybe like that signature win. Like they didn't beat Houston when they matched up, and they do have a loss to Northwestern where you're kind of like that should have been a win. But they did beat Cincinnati pretty handily. Cincinnati just went into BYU and handled BYU. I watched that game,
Yeah, yeah.
and
I
I
watched
won't
both.
lie.
I watched
Yeah,
both teams this weekend. I watched Dayton beat UMass as well.
yeah. I won't lie. When I heard that once again Malachi Smith was down for the year again, a couple of years ago, I think it might have been 2 years ago, I picked Dayton as like my sleeper team of the year. We had just come off an awesome interview with Deron Holmes. There was a lot of hype around Mike Shaverjam's Mongolian Mike. Like
Mm-hmm.
Malachi Smith was supposed to be healthy. Like there was a lot of hype around that team, and they fell flat. The year before that, they started off. They had beat Kansas, I believe, the year that Kansas won the national
Yep.
championship.
Yep.
They missed the tournament because they laid an egg against LaSalle, and they never were able to recover in the rankings from that a couple years ago.
Right.
Now finally, so I was like, I like this team. Deron Holmes is my guy. Ever since we interviewed him, I did edits. I scouted him a bunch. I had people asking me about him. I was super high on him. I was hesitant, and now I'm hopefully, knock on wood, whatever. They are playing awesome. They look really good. They've kind of had guys step up and fill that void. And then Deron Holmes is playing phenomenal. I mentioned him a bunch.
But yeah, I was so impressed with his play against UMass. He looks in better shape.
Yep.
He looks quicker. He looks faster. His shot looks better. And I don't know if you saw the dunk against
Yeah.
UMass,
Yes.
because
Yes.
UMass is no small team. They get some big
Yeah.
boys, and that dunk was just like, it was funny. You see his teammates when they showed the replays. His teammates were like shocked. I mean, genuinely shocked. They're like holding their heads.
Yeah.
um,
Like
but here's
he's
the killer in that game. All right, what happened last year was they not only did they lose Malachi Smith, they lost their backup point guard, and he often starts as a combo guard, Kobe Elvis,
Kobe Elvis.
and
Yeah.
they also lost their 3-point marksman, Kobe Bray. All right,
Mhm.
this all happened last year. So this year, Malachi Smith goes down 7 minutes into the season. And the announcers are doing the UMass game, and Dayton got off to a great start because Deron Holmes was just going crazy.
Yeah.
And Kobe Elvis, now the point guard, just made a nice play. And they were saying, he struggled with injuries last year, but he's back this year. And just as the announcer said, he's back this year, he was like going up for a layup, and he came down and he hyperextended his knee.
Yeah.
I kid you not. I was like, oh my God. So he tried to come back. He played for a little bit, but it must have been hurting him, or he wasn't effective, and he sat out the rest of the game. So I know he's questionable for the next game, so I don't think it's super serious. But yeah, I mean, Dayton is just snake bit. And God, Anthony Grant, get a point guard in there, from the portal that I don't think Malachi Smith is. He might be an all-conference player in the A10, but I don't think
Yeah.
he's a pro prospect. He's just too small, and he hasn't been able to stay healthy at all. So get another point guard. Get
No, I
another
agree.
point guard.
But yeah, so I mean, this Dayton team, I like them, and then I want to root for them. I like actively. I'm not gonna lie. There's a little bit of like I want to root for them because I like them. I like the players on that team. So maybe there's a bit there. I do want to give Deron a shout out. Ever since we did the interview, there were things we here at HPP were like got to work on. He's shooting 42% from three on 2.2 attempts per game. So I mean, he's not a 3-point shooter, but that's exactly what you want to see from a big is
Shot looks
step
pretty
out, hit
damn
it.
good though.
It looks good. Still not the rebounder I would like him to
Yeah,
be. He's only
yeah,
at
yeah.
still not the. I mean, 7 boards is fine, but like
When you're
I mean, if
6'10" and have his muscle,
yeah, I'd like to see that in the 10 plus range.
well,
But
at least 8 or 9.
yeah, I just personally think that like on a team where like you said they keep getting snake bits, like dude, you're the dude. Like go out there and
Oh yeah,
you should be gobbling up
because
rebounds.
in years past they usually had one or two other bigs. He's the only
Yeah,
real big on that
he
team.
is the
Really.
dude. So I'm
I
like
mean,
from a sheer
they have
need.
one transfer from Buffalo who's a 7-footer, but he hardly plays.
Yeah.
So it's usually Deron Holmes and 4 other guards, really. So there's no reason why he shouldn't be grabbing the boards.
And the last thing, I love to see it, 2.2 blocks a game, only 2.3 fouls per game.
Yeah.
So he's defending the rim at a really great level. He's basically blocking as many shots as he's fouling. So that's awesome to see. And then another team that I'm a bit partial to, anyone who listens in, is Miami. I know that they've had some ups and downs. I haven't really seen them play. The last time I watched a full Miami game was when they got handled by Kentucky, which was a game, and then Kentucky just blew that thing wide open. But I still think from just a talent standpoint, that core of Nigel Pack, Wooga Poplar, Norchad Omier, and Matthew Cleveland's playing pretty good basketball too right now.
Very good basketball. And
very good basketball.
And the international freshman, he's kind of like a point forward or a big point guard. He's been playing a lot with Poplar out. I forget, I'll tell you his name in a sec, but he's been playing excellent ball. So Miami, we thought we were worried about their depth. Keyshawn George.
Yes.
Keyshawn George has really stepped up. He looks like a legit pro. I wouldn't say I wouldn't suggest he come out this year, but I could see in a year or two him being in a draftable player. And so the only thing is size. They really don't have they don't have a 7-footer. They don't have a shot blocker.
If you look at their lineup on the ESPN, it's Norchad Omier, and then the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys in terms of minutes played, which is basically their whole rotation, are all listed as guards or guards kind of wings. But
and Omier 6'7" at best.
Yeah. Now, I love Norchad Omier. I love the motor that he plays with, but at some point that does get the best of you when you start having to play those Hunter Dickinson types. You have to play those Kalkbrenner types, not have the Deron Holmes. At some point, you need some size because we were worried about it last year when he had that ankle injury coming to the tournament. If he can't go, what is their ceiling like from being able to protect the interior and score inside? Now, obviously, he was healthy and they made a run, but I think that core group of those 4, the way they're playing right now, I think as long as they stay healthy with Omier, Wooga comes back healthy, and then Matthew Cleveland, Nigel Pack continue to play at a high level, guard play dominates in college basketball. It always kind of levels the playing field, especially in the tournament. And they have a really nice group of them with that kind of 3-man, those 3 at the top. And like you said, Keyshawn George is playing well. So I'm going to say Miami and Dayton are my 2 teams. Again, I'm partial to both. I like both teams. I like players on both teams, but I wouldn't want to see them come playoff times.
Right. Miami would have been my first choice. Florida would have been my second. I think Florida's got a lot of athleticism. They have really good size. I think when they've lost, the games have been pretty damn close. They played a fairly tough schedule. So they would be my top 2 choices. I got a couple others though that I really like. I really like Iowa State, though they're young. They're a young team. They're probably a year away, but I think if this group stays together, you're probably looking at a top 10 team next year for sure. I love Wake Forest if Monsanto comes back. If Monsanto comes back, Wake Forest is going to challenge for the ACC title, I think.
Wake Forest just breaks my heart as a Zags fan. I'm happy to see it, but God, seeing that team do well is heartbreaking.
We will get to that. And lastly, and we're going to talk about this team a little more, but Oregon. If Oregon gets healthy, they've only lost, they're 11-3, and they've been doing it with what we would consider players that wouldn't start on a lot of teams. They wouldn't start for a lot of top 25 teams. Right now, I'm drawing a blank. Dante, Nafala Dante.
Nafale Dante and Nathan
Biddle are both out. And they just got Malik Cook, one of their star freshmen, back. And this team still is winning. And we'll talk about that a little more. But if they get healthy, wow, Oregon could be really tough.
Yeah, they're a team I would you look at the Pac-12 has had some surprise. Like Arizona's Arizona, but they've had some serious disappointments, which we'll get to. And the 2 teams everyone else thought would be kind of fighting behind Arizona and UCLA and USC, but Utah and Oregon, who are both on this list, have been. I saw Utah live at St. Mary's, and they impressed me when they beat the Gales in Moraga, and then Oregon. I didn't think they could survive without both of those guys for an extended period of time. I thought I picked against them. I think I might have picked UCLA to beat them because I thought,
Yeah,
man,
we all did.
like,
We all picked
yeah,
UCLA.
I was like, I don't know how long you can go without your two best bigs. Like maybe one, maybe no Nafali Dante, you're fine for a little bit. Biddle just has to pick up the slack or vice versa. But I'm like, no, both of them. And those are their two best bigs and their two best players. You could argue.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
going into the season, they certainly were considered their two best players.
So I was like, I give credit where
there
it's
is
due.
someone who has emerged, which we'll get to.
Yes.
All right. Before we continue, I want to warn our audience. I have a lozenge. Is a lozenge?
Lozenge.
Yeah, in my mouth. So it sounds like I have marbles in my mouth. I'm fighting, kind of losing my voice. I'm getting a little hoarse, so I'm hoping that helps. And that reminds me of a joke, Drew. Where do you go when you suffer an injury while playing peekaboo?
Where?
The ICU. That joke is so bad you have to laugh. All right.
Oh.
So now we'll finish up. We'll finish up our notebook with the one last topic, and we're going to be talking about the most disappointing teams. I've listed a handful here, and if you have others, you certainly can add to the list. I'm asking you to pick one team out of this list that you think is still very viable, very much in the hunt to be a factor in March, and one team that you can just stick a fork in. They're done. They're not going anywhere. And so my list would be Arkansas, Texas A&M, Alabama, USC, UCLA, St. Mary's, Virginia, Michigan State, Maryland, and Kansas State.
Man. So I'll start with the team that I'm ready to stick a fork in. I've seen this team a lot, and that is UCLA. I think actually on this list, UCLA is the worst team on this list from what I've seen. You can go to any ranking system you want. I know in KenPom, they're not even in the top. They're like outside the top 100. Well, my eye test tells me this team is not good. Adem Bona is the only thing that keeps this team relevant's not even the right word, but like keeps this team from being like a complete dumpster fire. It's like the house is on fire and Adem Bona has a Dixie cup of water and he's like tossing a Dixie cup of water on it. He's trying. I think this is like a bad basketball team. I remember when, again, being a Zags fan, when I saw our preseason schedule, like, man, okay, like this is going to be a battle. Hope we get some good wins. USC was on there. They also have been bad, but I don't think as bad. UCLA. And now I'm like, geez, that shouldn't even count. Like, are those even countable games? Like, dear God, they look bad, man. So it's just really disappointing because I watch a lot of West Coast hoops because that's where I'm at. And again, with how busy I am, I catch those games. Like USC's been disappointing, but I still think there's enough talent and firepower there where at any given moment, if things click, I don't want to see a Boogie Ellis if he gets going. I don't want to deal with Isaiah Collier. Like, I think Bronny James is incredibly overhyped, but I still think he's a solid player and like he's getting healthy and getting back into it. Like there's room for them to maybe improve. I think UCLA is not going anywhere in terms of getting better. I'm ready to stick it in them. In terms of turn it around, I think all these teams are all super flawed. That's why they're on this list. I mean, name brand wise, you look at like a Virginia and Michigan State and you think like they should be able to. Like Michigan State has the talent. I mean, they came in with a loaded recruiting class. They brought back super seniors. Like they have a game where they blow out Baylor and then they string together a bunch of bad losses. So I think like Virginia and Michigan State on the name brand, I'm going to be honest. I don't really know that I really truly believe in any of these teams. If you were to ask me which team I think is most liable to get into March, just like get into March, I do think St. Mary's has a pretty solid path, has probably the path of least resistance to maybe turn it around and St. Mary's has the best shot on this list to be in position, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because the WCC is down. My Zags are as vulnerable as they've been in a decade. Well, maybe not a decade, but 7 or 8 years. This is the most vulnerable they've been. St. Mary's has strung together some wins. They do have a good win on the road at Colorado State, where they actually play good basketball. Mahaney's coming off one of his best games of the year. If Dukas can get his back right enough, that does help them. I just think they have the path of least resistance to get to the tournament and be viable for a game or two, because they have a bankable thing. They do defend very well still. Like, they are still a very good defensive team. Offensively, they just evaporate at times. So UCLA, I'm done with. I want nothing to do with them. They don't need to be on TV. They are bad. In terms of teams I think can turn it around, I've seen them in the most. I think St. Mary's, because I think they have the path of least resistance. And I think I'm going to just leave it at that. I don't really believe any of these teams, to be honest. So this is me going to my logical brain. St. Mary's is, to me, the easiest answer, because they have the least amount of talent to have to get through to put themselves in a chance to get into March. And, once you're in March, kind of all bets are off. You never know. Anything can happen. So I'll go St. Mary's, can make a rally. UCLA, they're done. Stick a fork in them.
Right. Pretty much all of us liked Michigan State to be in the Final Four. I still think they're going to make the tournament. Yeah, and maybe they'll do another run to the Sweet 16, but I that's as far as I see this team going. Yeah. The team that the rankings, the power rankings, really love Alabama, but I don't see it.
I do not like Alabama as 10.
Huh?
KenPom has them as the 10th team.
Yeah, and in other rankings, I'm higher. I just don't see it.
No shot.
I think you touched on it. The team I think has the most upside here is USC, and so that would be my pick. If USC made it to the Sweet 16 or Elite 8, I don't think I would be shocked. Final Four, that's stretching it. But if you look at Collier's game log, it is amazing. When he plays well, they win. When he doesn't play well, they lose. Yeah. It is so amazing. I've never seen anything like it. There is a statistic the Real GM uses. They call it FIC. It stands for Floor Impact Counter, and it's kind of like a fantasy rating system. Mm-hmm. But usually, if you get 10 or more, that's a good game. Every game that he's had like 9.9 or more, they've won. Anytime they've gotten less, he's gotten less, they've lost. Yeah. But we still haven't seen Kobe Johnson's not playing like he did last year. Yeah. And of course Bronny's still working into the mix. Yenso is not. It still hasn't lived up to its potential. So there's so much potential that drips off this team. I agree with you. UCLA is the worst. Not potential-wise. They're just too damn young. They're just too damn young, and they don't have a go-to scorer. Bona is a great player, but he's really a defensive athlete now. Mm-hmm. Amara has been a big disappointment, along with just about every other freshman on that team. And that's basically what they have. They have, I don't know if anybody's a senior on this team except for the transfer from Utah.
They went young, they went international, and that's a tough combination. That is, especially for a coach like Mick Cronin. Like, that's a tough combo, man. Like, you brought in a lot of young guys and guys that aren't from here. So there's just, it's tough. I'm not saying that team can't be good, but right now, no shot. They have no shot.
Here's the team I think doesn't make the tournament, definitely doesn't make the tournament out of this group. And I think, it's a toss-up to me between Virginia and Maryland. Virginia just doesn't have the talent. They just don't. And they've had some good recruits, but they're all like freshmen and sophomores. And Tony Bennett doesn't like to play freshmen and sophomores. They don't have a legitimate big. They have Beekman and Ryan Dunn, and that's about it. Maryland, they lost the kid from playing for Villanova, Hakeem Hart.
Yeah.
But they should still be better than they are. But
Totally.
I don't see them being any better than middle of the pack in the Big Ten, and that might not be good enough.
I don't think it will be. Yeah, like I think looking at this team, like really quickly, like UCLA is not making the tournament. I don't know if Maryland's gonna make it. Kansas, I haven't watched Kansas State this year. And like some of these teams are teetering. Like if they don't figure it out, they're also
Yeah.
liable. Like
Yeah.
it's you got to get going in
Even
conference
Texas
play.
A&M is teetering. Arkansas is teetering. You know, if the tournament was today, Arkansas probably doesn't make it, even with that win over Duke.
Nope.
And you know, A&M's not bad, but they haven't played great.
Yeah.
Alabama, as I said, you know, the computers love them, but I don't.
No.
You know, so there we go.
I'm not. I remember when Grant Nelson was in the portal. He was kind of like the last guy that people like. He was like the last kind of big name. I remember everyone was trying to figure out. And I know he was linked to the Zags for a bit. I watched. Who did I watch? I watched Alabama play somebody not too long ago. That dude is a chucker. He had I don't know if it's because he has a green light or he thinks he has a green light, but there was one game I watched him in, and my God, that dude was just putting shots up, and I'm like, this is not North Dakota State, man, or like this is a different
The thing of
level.
it is, in North Dakota State, he played a lot from the high post. Now he's like
Yeah,
now he's like a catch and shoot guy.
yeah. No, yeah. I feel like we might have dodged the bullet there. We need help. That team's not ready, not where they should be at, but yeah, I've not been impressed with him.
Right. I mean, their best player is Mark Sears. And nothing against Mark Sears. He's a nice college player, but that's not the type of thing that's going to take you to the Final Four.
No, not at all.
All right, so let's move on to our stock report. And all right, we're going to start off with Dillon Mitchell, a player who I think is a lottery selection. Most people, the last time I did a survey, now keep in mind, folks, I do a survey, I don't know, maybe every other month of where other sites are ranking people. And I think they had him like middle of the second round. I think he's a lottery pick. And what are your thoughts on Dillon Mitchell? I mean, I just love Dillon Mitchell.
Yeah, I think Dillon Mitchell is just like it's like I don't he just kind of always shows up. You know, like I look at you look at his game log and you're like he doesn't have a game where you're like, oh man, Dillon Mitchell was bad. Like, yeah, if you just look at the box score, you might think, oh, a couple games he was under double digits, but it's because they blew the team out. Like they blew out some of these, like they blew out Rice. So he only had 6 points, but he was 3 of 6 from the floor and grabbed 13 boards. They didn't need to do a bunch of scoring.
Right.
But in games where he's kind of had to show up, like I know they just lost to Texas Tech. I caught a little bit of that game. 16 points, 11 boards, 4 assists, 50% from the floor. That's a pretty damn good stat
And
line.
the best part of his game is his defense.
And I understand, like, we're not even talking about the fact that I know early on when we last talked about him, his like stocks, his blocks, and were super high. He's cooled off a little bit there. Like he's not, and part of that's because the competition's gotten better. But I mean, he's still putting up really, really good numbers in those categories. And then the thing about defense is it's not so much about the stats, it's like the eye test. Like is he move well laterally? Does he contest at the rim? Does he rebound and end plays? He does all of that.
Okay.
I think he's just a really, really, really solid guy. Like just he's the type of guy that you draft and like you know what you're gonna you're like there's some bankable skills there. And if the offensive game comes along and he can just kind of rim run and kind of hustle his way and just physically use his body to get to 8 points a game, 10 points a game, this is a dude who I think at some point could be close to a double-double just off of the motor. I really like him. I mean, he's not a top 10 dude, but back half of the lottery to me in that like 12, 13, 14 spot for a team that maybe is like, we just need a guy who we could probably give some rotational minutes to kind of off rip. I like Dillon Mitchell. And I think you look at like, if you just look at the box score, I don't know how you look at that and think that he's like a second round talent, to be honest.
Well, yeah, when you take into account, you know, he's physically strong.
Yeah.
He's one of the best athletes in college basketball.
Yep.
He has NBA athleticism. He'll be able to defend immediately on an NBA level. He's going to give you boards. He's going to be able to score on cuts, rim runs. And yeah, the only thing, really we're waiting for, if he had a jump shot, we would be talking upper half of the lottery.
For sure.
But okay, maybe he slips to like 20, maybe 25, but he's definitely a first round pick.
Yeah, I think he's a first round. I don't know how he isn't a first round pick to me. I think he's
So we're all buying then.
absolutely buying.
Yeah,
If
definitely.
he has a big conference, I know they just lost to Texas Tech, but if he has like a big conference run with as good as the Big 12 is in terms of just the amount of ranked teams and kind of border ranked teams, I don't know how you look at that. Like I've always been a big believer in like when guys produce against the best teams, like that's kind of the first thing I look at is what did you do against those good teams? And he produces against the good teams for a 2-month period. I think it's kind of a no-brainer to me.
Yeah. And we're going to stay in the Big 12, and we're going to talk about Kevin McCullar, a player that he's mainly been known for his defense, but he's taken over that role for Jalen Wilson. He's become this year's version of Jalen Wilson, averaging over 20 points a game, bringing down close to 7 rebounds, close to 5 assists, 1.6 steals per game, 0.6 blocks per game. He's basically doing everything for him. And the one thing he's doing this year that he never did before is he's making his threes. On over 4 attempts per game, he's shooting 36%, also shooting 84% from the free throw line. Kevin McCullar is another excellent defender. Like Dillon Mitchell, one of the best defenders in the country. And he's a good athlete. He tested out well when he was in the combines, not last year, I think it was the year before, tested out well. He's not as good an athlete as Dillon Mitchell, and he's not as big as Dillon Mitchell, but and so I'm thinking, maybe late first round, early second round. But I too am buying Kevin McCullar stock. I was never as high on him as some people, but this year he's doing all the right things. What can you say? I do have one knock on him. The guy's always banged up.
Yeah.
They're playing Texas Tech. Or not Texas Tech. Who'd they play on Saturday?
TCU.
It's a real close game. And he was, they were talking about him playing on a sore ankle. He's always got something going on with his body. So that's a concern, in the NBA where people miss, 2 weeks with hangnails. That's got to be a concern. But what do you think of Kevin McCullar?
Yeah, I agree. I think like Jalen Wilson's a really good, just kind of like it's a simple comparison, statistical profile, kind of looks the same for their like last year, both from Kansas. I would say that like I'm probably in that back. If he keeps producing the raw stats he is right now, I think back half of the first round is really where he'll probably go because people are just going to get kind of enamored with the stat sheet stuffing that he's doing. I mean, there's definitely some questions. I think offensively, kind of like Jalen Wilson, kind of comes and goes. Like there'll be a game where he's just, killing. Like against UConn, he was awesome. That was the last full Kansas game I watched. I watched some of the Indiana game, but against UConn, he was like the best player on the court for them in a big matchup. Was awesome. Against Indiana, the bit I saw, couldn't buy a bucket. And that's kind of been the case. So you look at the dude has had games where he's kind of completely disappeared. He wasn't great against Kentucky either from the floor, if I remember correctly. He's a little turnover prone. He's been better, but he's had a couple bad games with the turnovers. But I still think it's a pretty solid buy just from the standpoint of you're not expecting him to go super high. Like if you just looked at the box score, you might argue, how is he not a first rounder? He's damn near 50% from the floor, 26-5 or whatever. But it's like, there's still flaws. And it's like he hasn't proven to me like over an extended period of time and like over a career that he's a great shooter. He's been better, but I still think it's like, is it one of those where you're having a good shooting year? Like he has not shot the 3-ball well the last 2 games at all. I think he's made 1 3 in his last like 10 attempts when I was looking at the notes, but he's proven a willingness to take them. So yeah, I think when it's all said and done, if Kansas continues to, be one of those top teams and his box score numbers stay kind of consistent, he'll be a back half of the first round. If maybe he slips a little bit or the team struggles a little bit, they just hit a snag, I can see him getting to that second because I think people will start looking more at he's turning the ball over a little bit, how the offense comes and goes, because Kansas is so top heavy that if he struggles, they'll struggle. So if he hits a snare, the team's going to hit a snare. But yeah, I think it's a solid buy. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't really look at a 20 points per game, 6 rebounds, 7 rebounds, 5 assists kind of guy and be all like, oh yeah, this dude. I wouldn't sell on that. I mean, I'd buy it at that's a pretty good price to buy at if end of the first round is what we're talking.
Previous years, I'd say the last 2 years, not counting this year. So going 2 years back, people have listed him as like a second rounder usually, but like a solid second rounder. And I've always been, the guy's never averaged better than 10 points per game. He's never shot better than 31% from deep. How do you think, just because, he plays defense, but he's an older guy, he's going to be 23 come draft time, turns 23 in March. So that's the thing, he's blowing away his career scoring average. He's blowing away his career 3-point percentage of 31%. So yeah, it's 1 year out of, this is his 6th season because he redshirted as a freshman.
Oh, I forgot. You're right.
So
his redshirt had COVID.
Yeah. So yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But still, I'm buying.
Yeah.
But I'm not buying as anything more than maybe a late first rounder.
I think Jalen Wilson's a great comp for him. Like, finally took the step in his last year, kind of became the guy and performed pretty admirably. But like you look across and you're like, there's questions. Older, you've been around for a long time. It's almost like it is a bit less impressive because it's almost the point like, well, you kind of have to be doing this. Like, you've been around this long. If you're not doing this, like as a 6-year player, like what have you been doing the last, over a half decade?
Right. Well, he's been a role player, and now he's been thrust into. They need him. They need him to produce more on the offensive end.
They're a 3-man show. Anything happens to their big three, it gets a little dicey over there.
Right. So the next guy we're going to talk about is Devin Carter of Providence, another 3-and-D guy. Now Devin is only 6'3". That's one of the drawbacks, but he's blowing away his career numbers in just about every department. I think you could call him a combo guard. He's going to be 22 in March. So, but he's a junior, so he doesn't have to come out this year. But I just love Devin Carter's energy. And I'll let you talk more about him. Have you seen much of Carter?
To be honest, I haven't. I know that he's had to pick up some slack. He's going to have to pick up slack, but I don't actually know if I've even seen Providence play this year. Maybe once, but I'll be honest, not enough to talk about him.
Well, the thing of it is, he's always been a good defender. He's always been a good athlete. As I said, high energy, high effort type of guy. The type of guy you want to be teammates with. But this year, he's turned into much more than that. He's shooting, first of all, he's averaging 17 points per game. And if you look at his numbers, he's been on an upward trajectory every year. He's made a significant leap. And so now he's up to 17 points per game, 48% from the floor, 39% from deep. His shot used to be really funky, and it's looking better. It still looks a little funky, but 39%, people aren't going to complain. And he's also showing range. It's not one of these guys that always toes the line. He'll take them, from 5 feet, 6 feet back beyond the line. Free throw shooting, so. He's 70% for his career. But listen to these numbers. Rebounds for a 6'3" guy, 8.2 rebounds, and you throw in 3.2 assists, 1.4 steals, 1.2 blocks for a 6'3" guy. Turnovers are a little high, but he's going to be asked to do a lot now with Hopkins
Yeah.
out. And I think what you're going to see is, I think you're going to see his efficiency drop. Mark this date down. I think you're going to see his efficiency probably drop some because he doesn't have that they can't do that inside out game with Hopkins now. And
Yeah.
people are going to be able to focus on him defensively. He's going to be at the top of the game plan now for the opponents. And so teams are going to be, looking to take him out. And we'll see. He played really well against Creighton over the weekend. But can he continue to do that through Big East play? All right. The next guy I know you know.
Yeah, unfortunately.
His name is Hunter Sallis, who also is setting career marks all the way across the board. Some people actually, now let me look. I think he's rated probably even higher than I have him. Right now, I have him in second round range, but he's been climbing ever since he transferred from Gonzaga. He's been climbing up our board, and now I have him in second round range. I still think he could go higher. I just want to see where other people have him. By the way, so we're buying on all of the first three guys. So the last time I surveyed, people had him right about where we have him, in the 60s on the draft board. So remember, this guy was a top 20. I don't know if he was a 4-star or a 5, but I think he was a 5.
He was a
5-star guy. It was now in his junior season, standing at 6'5" and only 20 years old. That's 3 guys in a row have birthdays in March for us. He too, like Devin Carter and who was before Carter?
Well, we did McCullar.
McCullar. They're all born in March. So he'll be 21 in March. So take it away with your.
Oh my God. Oh, this one hurts so bad. I am a known Nolan Hickman non-believer.
I would call you a Nolan Hickman hater.
These two they came in together. This is the backstory for all of you. They came in together, a pair of 5. I don't remember if Hickman was a 5-star. He was like right on the cusp.
Well, he was always favored by the draft guys. Not us. I always liked Sallis better, but everybody always liked Hickman better.
So they came in together, and when the writing was kind of on the wall that there'd be, the changing of the guard with Strother and Timmy leaving, I really was hoping Sallis would stay because it was kind of, at this point, forcibly going to be his team. I always thought that last year when he came into games, good things happened. I think when you go back to that UCLA game that was back and forth all game long in the tournament, he's the one that came in and did kind of the right things. He defends. He's a good athlete. He's not like, at the time, I didn't think he was like an elite shooter. He's not. That's not his game. But now we are seeing kind of Hunter Sallis unleashed. I will take some form of credit, like, hey guys, the Zags do a good job developing guys. We get you ready. We get you ready when it matters most. When your number gets called, you come play for us. You're going to be ready because he has been awesome. He has been, all joking aside, I'm really glad to see him doing well because I was a fan of him. He just plays, with my opinion, with an awesome amount of energy. He's scoring the basketball at a really great clip. I still think that there's defensive tools there that he's still kind of learning how to use. And again, now that he's being unleashed, I think he's trying to figure out that right balance of offense and defense. With the Zags, he was a bit more of like the defensive-minded guard, and Hickman was the offensive-minded one. But, there's really not a lot to say that you can't just pull up the box score and go, oh my God, this guy's playing awesome, for a guy who was barely was fighting for minutes on the Zags. He's now, he has his Wake Forest team along with Efton Reed's emergence, another guy that we lost and could have really used. He's been awesome. And so, all joking aside, really happy to see him kind of finding, flourishing somewhere. And this is a Wake Forest team, man, that I think has done a really good job, or I should say program, of kind of finding these guys, these gems, and really kind of helping them realize their full potential. What was his name?
Hildreth?
Williams. I was thinking couple years ago.
Oh, Alonzo Williams.
Alondis Williams. Alondis
Alonzo,
Williams
right.
comes from a JC program and turns into the ACC Player of the Year, I believe, when he was there. They've done
Yep.
just an awesome
Yep.
job of finding guys. And I think Hunter Sallis' pedigree, I think the intensity in which he played with, I always saw the Zags. I'm like, this guy needs more minutes. And it's awesome to see it. I mean, he's still learning. He's more of a combo guard. He's not really a point guard, in my opinion. He's more of a scoring combo guard, but he's been awesome, man. He's knocking down free throws at a good clip. He's still got to figure out the three ball, but he's slashing, he's cutting, he's driving, he's defending. He's been awesome. And I think he's been one of the pleasant surprises in college basketball because so often when five-star guys don't really hit, they kind of just continue to, I think, to sink a little bit lower and lower, and people just get down on them, and
Right.
they start to throw the bust label on them. They hadn't even touched the NBA, and they throw the bust label, but he got a chance, and he's doing a lot with it.
I
And
agree.
this is an automatic buy, absolute buy, no questions
Yep.
asked.
Yep. I'm buying as well. I'm buying with everyone so far. And interesting enough, all four of the guys we've talked to, or talked with, or talked about, I'll get it out right, are all two-way players. Also,
Yep.
all top defenders in the country,
Yep.
who have made significant offensive strides. So the next guy on our list is another guy you're very familiar with, and a guy who's on nobody's draft boards except for us. I believe in our next release, I don't think we have him in the top 100 right now, but he's in our top 200. But I think I'm going to move him into the top 100. Again, he's kind of always been around, somewhere between 80 and 120 on our board for forever, seemingly. And that's Anton Watson at Gonzaga. The one thing that I think reason why he didn't turn pro last year, I think maybe the main thing was he didn't test out well athletically. But that's surprising to me because he doesn't look like a bad athlete at all. He looks like a good athlete.
I think Anton Watson is a fan favorite of mine, and I think Zags fans in general, because he is our Andre Jackson from the UConn team last year.
Right.
Different, like Andre Jackson had more guard skills. Watson's more of like kind of a traditional. He leans more towards the power forward side, whereas Jackson leans more towards kind of like the small forward, like wing combo side. But that's kind of the vibe that he gives me. I mean, obviously, you look at his game. I mean, he had that outstanding. I mean, one of the best single game outings, at least offensively, of the year against UCLA, which is a lot less impressive now because how bad UCLA has been.
At the time, yeah.
But I just think there's a role for this guy because he does anything and everything you need on a basketball court. I think he's a plus defender who can guard along the perimeter, who can drop down. I mean, I think he is, to me, he is one of the most underrated players in the country. I know there's some fandom to me there, but I think he's one of the most underrated players in the country because he spent his entire career when the Zags were at their peak as the first big off the bench. When they had that loaded team with Kispert, Suggs, he was the first big off the bench. Did really nice things, but he was always behind, the rotation. Then as that team falls, Chet Holmgren shows up, first big off the bench. It's the Holmgren and Timmy show. Then last year, it's the Drew Timmy farewell tour, and Strother kind of emerged as the second guy, as kind of the Robin to Timmy's Batman. He's finally getting the chance to be kind of the dude. And I know that the Zags haven't been the powerhouse they've been in the past, but it is not on this dude. I think if you look, he has been an absolute rock for this team and has given them whatever they've needed. They need offense. He's providing offense. He's scoring damn near 14 points a game, which in the college game is a really solid clip. He's doing it, shooting super efficiently. You need rebounding. He's averaging 7.5 boards. His playmaking's always been a bit underrated. I won't say he's not Andre Jackson in terms of his court vision and kind of the wow playmaking. Like Andre Jackson would make some plays where like, damn, that was really impressive. But it's always the right read, moves the ball. Like if hockey assists were a thing, this is a guy that have a bunch of hockey assists. And he's added the three ball to his arsenal. It's not elite, but he's shown a willingness to take one or two a game, and he's hitting them at one or two a game, which I think is a big factor.
Yeah,
and I think athletically,
44%.
Yeah, I mean the volume is, it's not amazing, but it's like if the offense, if the defense is giving it to him, he's not hesitating to take it, which is really good to see. And like for me, I know this team overall has underperformed, but if you really look, they don't have any bad losses. They've been competitive in every game. With UConn, San Diego, Purdue, and Washington were all competitive games. No bad losses. They don't have any great wins. I mean, Syracuse is unfortunately probably their best win, which is an okay one.
And
But
UCLA
yeah,
at the time, we thought UCLA was
and USC. I mean, they handled USC. So I love Anton Watson. I know everyone knows me as the Drew Timmy guy, but Anton Watson is the unsung hero. He does everything. Him not being on draft boards at all is shocking to me. I just think he has NBA. There's things he does. If somebody told me they thought Watson had a better upside as a pro than even Drew Timmy, I don't think you'd be crazy.
Yeah, because he's more athletic. He's
Yes,
a better defender.
better shooter from deep.
Yeah,
Like,
better.
yeah,
Yes, you're right. Yeah, at least.
I
Yeah, Timmy's like one of those games like he would take a three like maybe every third game.
yes,
Watson's putting up a couple per game, and for the first time in his career, he's making him at a nice percentage. But
yeah,
I think you're underselling him as a defender because again,
yeah. No, he's awesome.
I think he's on another one. I think all these guys on this list are some of the best defenders in the country. And another high energy, team oriented type player.
Some of the dunks that he pulls off, I don't know if you've watched. If you watch some of his dunk, like just this year, go to some of his dunks this year. They've been like, wow. So again, I don't testing wise, he's an eye test athlete for sure. He's a good athlete on the eye test.
And you know what? Who's to say? These combine numbers. I mean, it's just you get one shot at it. Let's see what happens this year when he's at the combines. And, I wouldn't be shocked if he produces very, very vastly different numbers. All right, so we've had 5 high energy, great defenders in a row, and we're buying on all of them because all of them have improved tremendously on offense. So now we're going to talk about a freshman, and that's Jackson Shelstad of Oregon, who's not really a defensive player yet. but this kid, he doesn't look 6 foot to me. Bill Walton was talking, kind of hinting that he might be over the weekend, was kind of hinting, or maybe it was Thursday night, that Shelstad might be a little taller than 6 foot. And he was saying how he had big hands and strong hands. But where this kid is just as smooth as they come among freshman guards. He's a 3-level scorer. He's excellent on the pull-ups. He's excellent with runners. He's solid at the rim. He's fast. He's quick. He's agile, good ball handler. Turnovers could improve. But he's a freshman. He's 18 years old, and he missed a good, about, the first third of the season so far. He's played in 11 games, and he's averaging 15 points per game, shooting 52% from the field and 44% from deep, 79% from the free throw line. So I think that this is one of the reasons why I mentioned Oregon. Watch out for Oregon, because they definitely hit a home run with this freshman. And now Mookie Cook is now in the equation, and Biddle and Dante might be in the equation pretty soon. This Oregon team could be dangerous. Have you seen Shelstad yet?
Yeah, I watched them when they played Santa Clara, which was his first game, and he was solid. He was offensively, he was 3 for 4. He hit both of his threes, if I remember correctly. So he was really solid, but he was still kind of in that bench role. I think he definitely played under 20 minutes. But I was like, oh wow, he looked very smooth. And at the time, Santa Clara was rolling. They were playing very good. And then I went back and I watched. I had a game that night, so I didn't watch it live. I went back and I watched the Washington game at Washington, because I was rooting against Washington because they knocked my guys off. And that was a great game, super down to the wire. And he was really impressive. Like I said, he was 7 for 11 from the floor. hit a three. He had 2 turnovers, but I'm a little less harsh with freshman turnovers, especially with freshmen where it's like you're playing without your 2 best bigs. You're carrying a big scoring load. The ball's been in his hand a lot because he's doing a huge load for this team on offense. And I was just really impressed with the pace of play in which he plays. Like you said, he's very smooth. Like he didn't shock me as like an athlete, but it was just kind of the like right place, right time, pick my spots, hit the shots I'm supposed to hit. I don't have any complaints with his game. I mean, yeah, again, I think he's more of a combo than a point guard, kind of like a scoring guy who can do a little bit of playmaking. But I mean, you look at the raw numbers and the 2 times I've seen him play, and it's like he could be a problem next year. Like he
I
could.
think he's a problem this year.
No,
I watched him against USC and UCLA, and he outplayed. And those two teams are loaded with
yeah,
freshmen. He outplayed all
for
the
sure.
young guys on both of those teams.
I just mean from a standpoint of like next year. I know the Pac-12 won't exist anymore, but I'm just like I could see him being like if he. I'm trying to like make it not sound. He'd be like an all-conference Pac-12 dude next year. Is like that was the height of which I think he could reach. He could be an all-conference. I know it's hard when you start going like the Big Ten now. It's like there's so many teams there as a sophomore, but like if the Pac-12 still existed next year, he'd be a guy that I'd have on my preseason like all-conference team. Just looking at these numbers, I mean, he's playing really good basketball.
What about NBA stock?
I'm gonna buy right now because he's exceeding expectations. Physically, I don't
He's
like.
nowhere on. Well, last time I looked, he was nowhere on draft board.
Yeah, that's why I would say I buy because I think he's not coming out this year. I would be shocked if he was. Like I don't hear anything.
I would too.
But like I could see him next year, taking another leap. Physically at 6 feet tall, I think my biggest concern is I don't think he's a super athlete. And usually when you're in that 6 foot under range or 6'1", you kind of have to have that plus athleticism or be a lights out shooter. And I think the shooting is where if it continues and trends this way, that could be where he banks his way in.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to become a super athlete, but I mean, these are just some of his shooting numbers from three, and he's taken at least 2 in all of these games. 67%, 50%, 57%, 67%, 50%. That's his last 5 games. And he's taken at least 2 in all of those games. So it's like if the shooting continues and maybe he gets a little bit sharper as a playmaker, cuts back the turnovers, I think that will be his way in as a really solid offensive kind of spark. Because I don't think he's the plus athlete to make up for the height and the weight.
Right. Well, right now you can get him dirt cheap. At least the last time I looked, he was nowhere on draft boards. I'm buying. Obviously, the height could be the thing that limits him. I expect him to play in college for another probably 2 years.
Totally.
And at least, maybe he'll stay all 4. But yeah, I'm buying. All right. So before we go on to our last guy, he's the last guy I added because of a question we got in the mailbag. And so I'm going to skip down in the mailbag. And Rob asked, why isn't Stanford's Kanaan Carlyle on your big board? First of all, we don't call it big board. We call it draft board. Big board sounds like something 5-year-olds play with, like big wheel. But anyway, he said, Rob continues to say, the kid killed it against Zona and is averaging over 20 points per game. So with that question, even though Carlyle's only played about 5 games or so, I added Carlyle to this list because he's certainly red hot. He played at Overtime Elite. He was a top 50 recruit. And we were hard on, I'm drawing a blank on Stanford's coach, Haas. On Jared Haas, for not playing him. I didn't know this. He was ineligible for the first 8 games because of academics. So he had to get his academics up in order to be able to play. So, and now he is playing, and boy, what a difference does he make for that Stanford team. They finally have Stanford's always been a good team, but they really don't have anybody explosive, it's just a bunch of smart, good players who hustle, hustle and bang. But this kid's explosive. This kid can shoot. I'm impressed. I wasn't going to talk about him yet because it's early days. So he's played 6 games, 3 starts, and he's only averaging 24 minutes per game. He's not averaging over 20 points per game. He's averaging 13 points per game. I know the game that Rob mentioned, he scored 28 in that destruction against Arizona. But still, he's averaging 13 points per game and playing only 24 minutes per game. And his shooting splits 50% from the field, 46 from deep, 88% from the free throw line, 3.8 rebounds, 2.2 assists, also averaging at least a steal and almost a block per game. Turnovers are high, 2.3. But again, we're talking about a freshman who just started his college career. He's only 19, even though he played at overtime elite. 6'3". I thought he was a little bigger. I thought he was more like 6'4", 6'5". He looked a little bigger to me. I'm surprised it says 6'3", but who knows? Maybe, just like Shelstad, you never know. These guys that are still in their teens, they can always add an inch or so. Have you gotten a chance to see Carlyle play?
Yeah, because I went back and watched the Arizona game because I was shocked. So kind of out of shock, I was like, "There's no way. This has got to be fake." No, I've been hard on Stanford as a local and as someone who had worked there. So I've been critical, but I mean, like I think Rich, you hit it best saying this is the type of guy that brings that. There's an explosiveness to him. There's an element where there's no guy on that Stanford roster right now. Maybe Spencer Jones. But I feel like outside of him, even there's not really a guy on that roster. I'm like, does he have a 30 ball on deck? Like, is there 30? Does he have a 30? A 25, 30-point game in his back pocket that could happen? And mostly with Spencer, it's more just because he's proven he's been around. Like he had, I think, 27 against Arkansas. But this kid is the type of guy that comes in, and if he sees one go in, he might see 7, 8, or 9 go in, and then next thing you know, you have something on your hands. I mean, I know he cooled off against USC. He wasn't great. Scoring. I mean, he only had 6 points, but it's like this gives Stanford a new dynamic. This is the kind of that X factor, almost more like a wild card, I'd say, where it's like he's a freshman, he's going to turn the ball over, he's going to take bad shots, but Stanford almost kind of needs, in a way, almost like a bad shot taker, but a bad shot maker, if that makes sense. Like every team kind of needs a guy that shot clock's winding down.
Caleb Love.
Bingo. That he's like the poster child of that. But as much as that can be frustrating at times, shot clock's winding down, 3, 2, 1. It's a fall away, short corner, mid range jumper, and he cans it. That's what I think Carlyle kind of potentially brings to this team. It's still early, so it's like it's still really early in his career, and it's really 2 good games with a couple other not great games. But that Arizona game, if that had to open your eyes and make you think, okay, there's something here. And he has in his last 3 games put up 9 assists total. So he has kind of figured out some passing maybe. So this one's really hard for me to say. I almost think like it's kind of a default buy because he didn't play, he didn't have any stock, and Stanford wasn't doing well. So it's almost kind of like, hey, the fact that he has that ability almost makes you want to buy it. But this is what Stanford needed.
But doesn't he just change the way you feel about Stanford?
That's what I'm saying. Like now I feel like when the shot clock's winding down or they need a bucket, like the other team goes on a run and they need to stop it, it's not just going to be pass, screen, call out a play, and run the shot clock down, hope for a good. It's going to be like, hey, single high ball screen gets set for him. Now he can come downhill and go almost like go hoop. Just go hoop. Because sometimes you need that. You need a Caleb Love. You need guys like that on the best teams, and you got to live with the bad shooting nights. They're gonna happen. But I think that this is the first guy I've seen like from Stanford, at least in the last couple of years, where I'm like, okay, like this guy could be any given night. If he sees a couple go in, this could be a 20-point game in a variety of different ways. And it's more fun to watch than, like you said, the kind of classic Stanford. Yeah, you got the high IQ, but like when you play the really good teams
and the banging, they're always good at banging.
Yeah, but when you play the really good teams, sometimes it boils down to my guy can get a bucket
And
Your guy can't.
Right.
And now I think they have a guy that potentially it's a small sample size. He could completely go into a freshman. That could have been his signature moment in the rest of the year. He struggles, but it's like he did it against Arizona. I said a couple of weeks ago I thought Arizona was the best team in the country. I still think they're in contention. I think they're right up there. I don't think outside of the Stanford game they played a pretty solid schedule, but yeah, I think this is like kind of you have to buy because it's an unknown and take the fly white. It's an unknown, but you're getting it like with Shelstad super cheap. It costs you nothing.
Right. Yeah, I'm definitely buying. And Rob, to answer your question, he will be on our draft board, our next release. I can't say exactly where. I don't know if he's going to be. He'll definitely be top 200. Will he be top 100? I'm going to hopefully, at least watch another game or two, see how he does. But I'm impressed so far. So thanks for the question, Rob. So now we're going to move on to Who's Cold. And we're going to start off with your brother's favorite player. Your brother's a Duke fan, just like Caleb is. Diehard Duke fan. God, they're obnoxious. And we're going to start off with Tyrese Proctor, who missed a few games with injury and has come back and really hasn't done much in that debacle against Notre Dame that Duke was lucky to win. He didn't really do much. And here's the thing. He is considered, last time I looked, a top 10 draft pick. I've never seen Tyrese Proctor as a top 10 draft pick. Someone tell me why he's a top 10 draft pick. The one thing that he does exceptionally well is pass, and he's an efficient passer. He's low turnovers, so he's a great passer, and he's excellent at running the pick and roll. Of course, he's much more efficient when you look at synergy, look at the numbers, his efficiency is much greater when you include passing as just pure scoring.
Right.
But everything else about his game is mediocre at best. He also, he drives left almost, twice as much. Like 2 out of every 3 drives, he's going left. I don't know. He's not efficient at the rim. He's not a great shooter. He's not a great rebounder. What do people like that makes Tyrese Proctor a top 10 pick?
I think people look at Tyrese Proctor and they see a 6'5", 185, 190-pound point guard who does have good vision and all that. And on paper, that's exciting. That's a good size for a point guard, like if you're lead playmaking guard. But it's like, my brother's biggest complaint, I'm going to speak on his behalf because I hear it all the time, is he doesn't show up, really.
Right.
I think that's completely fair.
He can't carry a team.
Not at all.
Here, let's talk about past Dukies, like Trey Davis and his brother. What's his brother?
Oh, you're talking about the Jones? Trey and Tyus Jones?
Yeah, Tyus Jones. How is he any different from those guys, except for the fact that they shot better in college?
He's bigger.
They're a little smaller.
Yeah, I'd say he's bigger.
Yeah.
He's a bigger guy.
Well, here's another thing. He's Australian. Proctor's Australian. How is he any different than Josh Giddey? Now, Josh Giddey, I remember watching Josh Giddey playing in Australia. I was far more impressed with Josh Giddey than I've ever been with Tyrese Proctor.
How about Dyson Daniels? Another 6'7" kind of wing guard.
Well, Dyson Daniels, though, was a defensive monster.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're talking about these Australian kind of bigger guards, the Giddies, Dyson Daniels is 6'7" ish,
and
Giddy's
stronger,
6'7", 6'8".
more athletic,
and can defend
and plays defense way better than Giddey and Proctor.
That's what I'm just saying. Like, I look at Giddey and Daniels are two of the kind of that kind of new prototype of the big Australian guard. The last two that come to mind for me are Daniels and Giddey. One's completely on the offensive side, one's more on the defensive side. But I was more impressed with both of them than I am Proctor. Not even close.
Oh yeah, it's not even close.
Not even close.
Not even
close. I remember everyone was talking about Proctor.
Part of this is the draft class. But still, even with this draft class, he shouldn't be in the top 10.
No, there's no way. To me, his best game of the year came against LaSalle. That shouldn't count. you can't tell me you're a top 10.
LaSalle's a fair team. A fair team. I mean, they're not.
Yeah,
They're not
but
a
like
tournament team. They're not a tournament team, but they're going to be middle of the pack in the A10.
But that's the thing. It's like if you're a top 10 pick, or people are claiming you a top 10 pick, your best game can't be against a middle of the pack A10 team. Right. Your best game needs to come against Arkansas, which you lost and you were bad. Your best game needs to come against Arizona, which you lost and you were bad. Your best game needs to come
against Notre Dame.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
I mean, Notre Dame doesn't have anybody who's remotely on anybody's NBA radar.
Yeah, like I'm not. It's less to say be negative about LaSalle and more be like, go down the list of all the guys we probably have in the top 10, at least that are D1 or NCAA guys that we can track. Their best games, their signature games of the year so far, have come against other AP teams, on the road against a hostile. Like, you can't tell me, oh, here's my resume. My big shining moment is I scored 22 against LaSalle. I'm going to be like that, and I'm supposed to take that and go, you're a top 10 guy, when there's other guys who are scoring, 28 against an Arizona or a double-double against, against a Duke. So for me, I just don't think he shows up. And I think while the passing is nice and now he's a low turnover guy, it's like a passing specialist should be nowhere near. In today's NBA world, a passing specialist should be nowhere near a top 10 pick. Right. A passing specialist, if you're going to tell me that if passing is kind of your signature thing, then why did Andre Jackson barely go in the first round?
Right. And Andre Jackson played so much better defense.
So much better defense. An elite athlete.
Right.
And could pass, and he had that kind of passing gene.
Now, of course, Proctor's shot isn't as broken as Andre Jackson.
Sure. But even then, it's like, to me, I'm just saying, like, why wasn't Andre Jackson a lottery pick?
But Andre Jackson made an impact in every single game.
He would block a big shot. He'd grab big rebounds. He'd make a full court pass that you're like, how did he see that guy? Whereas I like Proctor. I'm like, yeah, okay, you can run an offense, but can you win me a game? Can you have a signature moment or a signature game where it's, you're the guy, not Flip, not Mark Mitchell, not Roach.
As a point guard surrounded by 5-stars, how is it that you can't at least make an impact in that Notre Dame game against, I just keep on harping on that because it's the last game I watched. And I was just sitting there with my jaw on the ground because, I'm a Notre Dame fan. And I'm like, oh my God, we can beat Duke. and Proctor is nowhere to be seen. And Filipowski, he was up and down in that game.
Yeah.
To me, the most impressive player on Duke is freshman Jared McCain. He's the one guy this year has been their best player.
That's fair.
I know Filipowski's had some good moments. And I'm not saying McCain should be drafted ahead of Filipowski, but right now, if I'm drafted, I'm taking McCain over Proctor.
Oh,
if I have to pick a Duke player,
Yeah. I just am like, dude, at some point, you got to give me something that if you want to be a lottery pick, there has to be a signature moment. There has to be that okay, I see, whether it's a tournament run, there's something. I'm like, I got nothing for you. I can't point to anything. And again, it's not even like he's a good passer, but it's not even like he's a Trae Young college passer who averaged
or Giddey.
Giddey. That's what I'm saying. He's got threes. He's averaging what? 4 assists a game. 4 assists a game.
No. I think he's averaging over 6, and he's averaging less than 2 turnovers. No,
Proctor's averaging 4.3 assists a game. I just looked it up.
Wow, I thought he was close to 6.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, that's not a bad number, but it's it's that doesn't make me go. If he was averaging
now
6,
I'm
7,
even less impressed because I was thinking I thought he had he was around 6 to 1.5 turnovers.
Now I will say it's a little skewed because didn't he get hurt in that Georgia Tech game? Or didn't he
he did. Out? He missed a few games.
He the Georgia Tech I'm looking at right now. It skews him because he technically played and he had 0 across the board because he played 1 minute and came out. So maybe if you want, he's averaging closer to 5 assists. Probably if you take that 0 out, but it's his season high in assists came against Dartmouth when he had 8, and it's that was Dartmouth. And then his second highest came against, I don't even know who is USI. I don't even know who that is. Southern Indiana. Yeah, so if you take those 2 games out, He's only had over 5 assists twice. Once against he had 5 or more assists twice if you take out those 2 games. Once against Arizona when he had 5, and then once against Michigan State when he had 6. So, yeah, not a Proctor guy. Definitely selling. Definitely selling.
I'm definitely selling too. And the next guy is another guy that I'm perplexed about what other people are thinking about him, and that's Riley Kugel of Florida. People last time I surveyed, and I usually survey like 6 of the top draft sites, including The Athletic, ESPN, CBS, Sports Illustrated, blah blah blah. Riley Kugel was somewhere on most people's book. Well, his average draft position was 17. People think he's a possible late lottery pick. Now, Riley Kugel was really hot at the end of last season as a freshman. Okay, as a true freshman, he got really, really hot down the stretch. Played very, very well. And he's very athletic. But we're talking about like maybe like a 5-10 game stretch. So I'm not about to give somebody lottery like respect for a 5-10 game stretch.
Nope.
And so I had him probably as like in the 60s, but he's dropping on our board. And the reason is his numbers almost across the board are worse than last year. Yeah, he's averaging a couple more points per game at 12 this season, but he's only shooting 39% from the floor, 28% from deep on nearly 5 attempts per game, 66 from the free throw line, 4.2 rebounds, respectable, 1.8 assists, 1.4 steals, all respectable numbers, but close to 3 turnovers per game.
Bad. So bad at turning the ball over.
This is a guy who basically put up a handful of 20-point games at the end of last season and makes a spectacular dunk maybe every other game. And people are like, wow, he can score, he can shoot, and he's super athletic. He's a lottery pick. And it just drives me crazy how people go from not having a guy anywhere on their draft board, all of a sudden he's a lottery pick. This shit just drives me crazy. But anyway, he started the year probably in the 60s on our draft board, and now he's getting close to following off our top 100.
Yeah, this one I've seen Florida play a couple of times. I saw them play against. They played Wake Forest. They lost. And I think I saw them play a little bit against Michigan because that game went to OT or double OT or something like that. He was a complete non-factor in that game. Honestly, this is a guy that's not even on my radar at all. I wasn't really familiar with him until you put him on the stock rising, stock dropping report. He never really stood out to me. I don't really remember him from last year's team, if I'm being honest. Looking at his
that's because he was pretty quiet up until the final 10 games or so.
Yeah, so I don't really remember him. If you pull up this year's kind of game log, he had a nice little 2-game spurt in 2 losses against Baylor and in that Wake Forest game where he played pretty well. But this dude is a walking turnover, which is super problematic. Gives you is a non-factor as a playmaker really, and I'm selling. And to be honest, I didn't even know I had stock. He just
I'm definitely selling. I'm certainly not a lottery pick. Certainly to me, not ready.
No way is this guy a lottery pick.
Not ready for the NBA, unless he drastically turns things around this year.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, do I think he's an NBA player? Perhaps, maybe even a first rounder, but not right now.
Yeah.
All right. So we're in total agreement in buying and selling. We bought all the hot guys, and so far we're selling all the cold guys.
You picked a lot of guys I like, man. You threw Mitchell, Sallis, and Watson in there. I had to buy them. And then you put in Oregon. You put a bunch of West Coast guys in there. Had to buy them. Those are my guys. Those are the guys I get to see play.
All right. Well, here's another West Coast guy. Day Mara, UCLA center. Let's see where the people have him projected. I know it was first round territory. They had Mara as a lottery pick. His average draft position was 14. You want do you want Mara as the 14th pick in the NBA draft?
They can draft me at 14. I'll sign a contract and I'll take Rich. I'll take like 90 grand. I'll take 90 grand. I'll sign. I'll give most of the money back. There's no chance. This is not an indictment. And look, I know he's a freshman. This is not an indictment on him.
He's only 18.
Yeah. So all joking aside, I know I can be a little dramatic sometimes. I'm not selling that he has no chance and he's going to be a bust of all bust. It's way too early. But he is not in the rotation for one of the worst Power 5 teams I've seen. How the hell is he a lottery pick?
Well, he's in the rotation, but he began the year as a starter, and now he's coming off the bench, and now they're actually using a 3 big. They got another big, I forget his name. But anyway, he's not getting a ton of playing time.
He hasn't eclipsed 8 minutes in his last 5 games.
Right. And he can't shoot, and he's not a great defender. He's not a great rebounder. He's too skinny. He
doesn't block shots, really.
He looks lost out there. I mean, eventually he will be a good rebounder and a good shot blocker. Can he do anything else? I don't know. But no one's taking him in the lottery. And if he came out today, where do you think where do you think? Maybe the last pick of the draft is on a flyer?
Undrafted. Okay, because it's a weak class, I could see him being like in the final 5 picks, maybe, because it's a weaker class, and so I could see somebody seeing the physical outline. Again, I know I'm being harsh. I think that there is an opportunity for him to expand his role as he goes on. I mean, when Adem Bona was first starting out, I wasn't overly impressed with him, and I'm not saying he's a lottery pick, but he has made strides. He's grown in that system. He's become a much more solid, better player. I think Mara can totally follow that kind of path and earn playing time, climb the ranks, and one day be a starter. I mean, 7-3, you don't find 7-3 on just lying around, but there's no chance, no shot. How can you say as an NBA person that a guy who's playing less than 10, who is not in the rotation really, in the Pac-12, so not even like the top Power 5 conference, on a bad team is a lottery pick? I can understand if he looks like an 18-year-old who's lost.
Yeah. He looks like an 18-year-old who's lost in a foreign country.
He played 3 minutes. I watched them against I watched a bit of the Stanford game, which they lost. He played 3 minutes, non-factor. And I watched them against my Zags. Obviously, I watch all their games. Played 3 minutes and picked up 3 fouls and a turnover. And it's like, the Zags are not what they were in the past. It wasn't like he was having to guard Timmy or Holmgren or Kiss. I mean, Ike is fine, and but like I'm sorry, it's stuff like this that drives me up the wall, because who thought that the lottery? Who the hell thought that? Like, somebody just
and the same guys who have him as a lottery pick also say Zach Edey is indraftable. Now,
I'm not an Edey guy at all.
Well, no, but my whole point of it is, Edey's bigger, Edey's stronger, Edey looks
more skilled.
It looks like player of the year again.
Yeah,
they do the same things, because it's not like Mara has a jump shot and Edey, doesn't. In fact, Edey shoots foul shots a lot better than Mara.
You can't foul Edey. He'll go to the line and he can't. I think like 78% of his free throws are.
Why is Mara a lottery pick and Zach Edey player of the year 2 years in a row running, likely not draftable?
Well, it's the same reason Trayce Jackson-Davis was undrafted, Rich. Come on now. He doesn't shoot threes. Come on. Like, we all know that. Trayce Jackson-Davis, as dominant as he was, doesn't really matter in the NBA game, despite being one of, like, if you were looking at a pure value for a pick, you can make the argument Trayce Jackson-Davis is like rookie of the year based on value of where he was at.
Right.
it's Chet and Wemby. I get that. I'm not saying he.
No, I
actually
understand what you're
competed.
saying. You're talking about
Yeah,
value per like dollar.
the dude just had a 16-point double, shooting 6 for 7. Every day, my poor family is so tired. I texted my parents when we got Trace Jackson Davis. This is a quick aside. Going nuts. I called my dad. I'm like, that's the steal. I was down with him at the 14th pick. We got him at. This is amazing. And every time he does anything on a basketball court, I'm like, I told you guys. I told you. I told you. And my dad's like, I get it. I'm like, no, but I just need you to know, like, I told you.
Trace Jackson Davis.
I love Trace Jackson Davis.
I loved him so much his last 2 years in college. He was so fun to watch. He wasn't a boring big guy, you know.
Nope. I love Trace Jackson Davis. Drew Timmy's my guy. There's a reason why I voted for Trace as Player of the Year last year in our poll, because
and we did. We picked him. On HP, we picked him as Player of the Year over Zach.
That's my guy. I love Trace.
All right. So the last guy on Who's Cold, this one hurts me. One of our first interviews on the show was Tyler Burton. Played at Richmond for 4 years. He's been, on and off draft boards. Usually, probably I'm going to take a guess, usually somewhere between say 60 and 100, and probably been there for us for the last few years in that range. But this year he's dropped down into the he's now below 100, and dropping. And because, the things that he was deficient in, he's still not able to do it. Now, again, this is another player, just like I harped on it, last year with Villanova's coach about, the way he uses certain players. I don't think Burton is being used. He definitely doesn't get used the same way. They use Burton, Villanova does, Kyle Neptune does, as kind of a glue guy. And now this is a guy who averaged 19 points per game last year and, 7.5 rebounds per game. And now he's down to 8.5 points per game. His rebounds are, still at 7.5, but all his shooting percentages are down. This is a guy who can run the pick and roll. This guy is an excellent cutter. He's not a good catch and shoot guy. Never has been. That's what Villanova's using him as. Yeah. Same thing they did with Cam Whitmore. They tried to turn him into a catch and shoot, stand around doing nothing guy, when Cam Whitmore had the potential to run the pick and roll, to be a super effective cutter and everything else. Burton has always done well in transition. Whitmore should have been able to do well in transition, but Villanova doesn't push the ball. And so Burton is just on the worst possible team. He's suffering the same fate Cam Whitmore is. And now the one thing that concerns me is people will say, well, Rich, what do you think he's going to do in the NBA? He's not going to run the pick and roll in the NBA. He's going to be asked to do the dirty work, and he's going to be asked to play defense and knock down threes. And you know what? He's only shooting 31% from deep, 33% for his career, and that's what has me concerned. Because even though Villanova's not using him to his potential, this is what he would do in the NBA. And he's not doing it well.
To play devil's advocate here, I think I know we've basically been kind of in agreement on buying and selling. There's a little bit of a hesitant buy here for me, just because I do agree that he's being utilized incorrectly. And I think we have a pretty long, and I know Richmond, Villanova, it's a different level, so maybe there could be some of that where like night in and night out, he's now playing against better competition. I'm going to only say a hesitant buy just because I feel like you can get him really cheap right now. This is a guy who has a resume that has shown us, again, that the three-point shot has now 2 years in a row looked off, but his junior and sophomore year, he was at 36%.
37 is the junior.
37.
Also shot. He's like shooting his foul shots at an all-time low. He's never shot less than 75%. This year, he's below 72.
And I think that's something when you look at the volume. I mean, this was a guy who was shooting 6+ a game in the past years. Now he's down to under 4. So it's like every miss just hurts you so much more. You have just you take if you take less, even if you miss less, it hurts your percentage more. I'm just saying hesitant buy for me because I think that we interviewed Burton a couple times. I remember we talked to him. I believe it was last year, no, 2 years ago, because he was injured. I believe, or he had a little bit of a nagging
No,
injury.
that was Flanagan. Burton, well, maybe he was. Maybe you're
No,
right.
he was because I remember he was hurt because
Yeah, yeah,
he was like lifting, but he wasn't practicing yet.
right.
It was during the but like I say hesitant buy because you get him so cheap, and it's like you look at the numbers and you're like, is like the rebounding is still there. He's like not turning the ball over. He's not really fouling. So it's like I don't necessarily know if is it the skill set or is it the utilization. And I'm
No,
gonna
I think it's the utilization. I
yeah
think he's so used to being the man.
yeah
And Kyle Neptune, what he does, Kyle Neptune constantly tries to put square pegs in round holes.
round holes.
He tries to he doesn't mold the system around what he has. He tries
Yeah.
to take the players he has and jam them into his system.
And
Uh,
that's where I think like when you look, he went from 14 shots a game last year. He's down to 6.5. So
yeah,
it's like
they
again,
just use him as a the dirty work guy.
exactly. And so every miss takes on a bigger significance because he's not finding rhythm. This is a guy who scored 20 a game or 19 a game, but to score points, you need to be in rhythm. You need to get shots up, and he's not getting those shots, and he's not getting the opportunity to get in rhythm. So maybe some of this is I like Tyler. I thought he was really solid for Richmond last year. I thought he was a great pickup for this Villanova team just based on resume. It's one of the reasons I think in general, we were relatively high on Nova. They got some, this is a nice addition. So hesitant by, I'm not saying he's going to be he should be a first round pick or even a high second round pick, but I'm like, I don't think he's this bad. I think a lot of this is the system is highlighting his deficiencies and not his strengths. And that's a failure on the coach and the system when you're highlighting your players' weaknesses and not your players' strengths. Yeah, I just personally am hesitant to completely sell on a guy who has over 100 games of Division I basketball under his belt, was effective for the last 3 years of his career, got better and produced at a higher rate each year. I'm just hesitant to completely sell because it's like, how does it? This guy's had over 100 games in his career. He didn't all of a sudden just forget how to play basketball and get really bad. The competition level increased for sure. The role kind of diminished, but I'm not ready to completely sell. I think there's still something here. I just don't know if his coach is doing his best to bring it out.
Right. But let's talk best case scenario. Let's say that he was doing close to what he did last year. If he did close to what he did last year at Nova, that would prove that he can deal with the competition.
Sure.
But still, I'm a little concerned about the jump shot. And so, and I don't think Tyler, I think he's a good athlete, but I don't know if he's an ideal NBA athlete. So, even if he was doing what he did last year, I think he'd still be kind of like, he'd probably be in our top 100. He probably would be in our top 100, but he'd probably still be, a borderline second round pick. I think that's the best Tyler could hope for. Now, of course, that's not going to happen, I don't think, unless he really knocks it out at the combines or something like that. So, yeah, you're right. He's on nobody's draft board. And do I think that if he was being used properly, that he might be in that range of a possible second round pick? Yes. The effort's always been there. He's a good kid. So, yeah, I'm buying. Not buying a lot.
Just for where you can get him,
Right.
and the track record. Like I said, this is a super senior, over 100 college games in his career. To go, I think it's just for where we can get him.
He's definitely going to be a summer league player. He's definitely going to be a G League player. Can he take the next step in the right system? We will see. But he's got to get that jump shot going.
Totally.
Because the NBA is going to say, yeah, Neptune's not using you like Richmond, but we still need to see you hit jump shots.
Yep. Which is
All
fair
right.
criticism.
So now we'll go on our picks of the week, and some of these games are probably done, but I have not looked at any scores. Actually, I can actually think we can save. We'll skip the mailbag because we're actually going the rest of the mailbag. So we got questions from Keon, Vince, and Cody. We will definitely get to those next week. I don't think none of them are really time sensitive, but we did get the Robs. So so let's do our picks of the week here. And we'll start off with tonight's games. Caleb did put in his picks for the week. So we have Houston at Iowa State. Caleb's going with Houston.
I'm going to take Houston. They're undefeated. They're number 2 in the nation. I know earlier I had said that they're like my hot take to not make the Final Four, but this isn't the Final Four. This isn't the tournament. I think I'm taking Houston.
I'm taking Iowa State. I don't know what happened. The game's probably over by now, but Ames, Iowa, that place is a crazy place to go to. And I think Iowa State's an underrated team. I know they're a little on the young side, but I think this is a good place for Houston to lose their first game. All right, we got another game. I know this one's not finished because this is a 9:00 game. Texas at Cincinnati. This is tough. This is probably the toughest pick on our entire slate. Caleb went with Cincy.
Cincy really impressed me when they handled BYU pretty good, but I'm going to take Texas. I think Texas has just kind of better players, but this is a tough game because Cincinnati's playing good basketball right now.
I, too, am going with the Longhorns, but like I said, this was a tough – I looked over the slate, and I'm like, damn, this is a tough one. All right, then we got Duke at Pittsburgh. Caleb's going against the Blue Devils, his Blue Devils, taking Pitt.
I'm going to take Duke. I think Duke is overall still the more talented team. So I'll ride with the Blue Devils.
I got to go with Duke too. As much as haven't been impressed by Duke, I also haven't been impressed by Pittsburgh. And Duke just has so much more talent. All right, now we have BYU at Baylor. Caleb's taking Baylor.
I'm taking Baylor. I like this team. I talked them up earlier. BYU, I think, is playing good basketball, but they're a little flawed. I think if they don't score from 3, I don't know how they score. I think that's what happened against Cincinnati. The Aziz Bendigo being back kind of thwarted them pretty good, and I think that BYU's got the athletes and the horses to kind of shoot with and physically go at BYU.
Wait, so you're taking –
Sorry, Baylor. Sorry. I'm taking Baylor over BYU.
Okay. All right. I, too, am going with Baylor, and you are right. BYU is kind of like live and die by the three-point shot. They set a record against Cincinnati at home, taking 44 threes and only made 13 of them.
Not going to cut it.
Yeah. So now they have a lot of shooters, and some of them just didn't show up that night. Basically, only one guy was really shooting well from 3.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got a couple things BYU's got to do. Their bigs, Foos Traore, who was on the show, and their other guy, Ali Khalifa. Those 2 guys have to bring more to the table for BYU to be. I think BYU's overrated right now. They're like 15th in the country. I think they're overrated. They need those big guys to bring more to the table. And both of them, now Foos is coming off of an injury. Both of them look out of shape. They gotta get in better shape. And it's probably too late to do it this season. But next year, is Khalifa I think they both can play next year. Yeah. So they got to come in better shape because right now BYU's live and die by the threes. Sorry, I went on a little diatribe there. All right. So tomorrow's games, North Carolina at NC State. Caleb's going with North Carolina.
I'm going to take the Tar Heels.
So am I, even though I tell you what, NC State does give that team fits, but I'm not too impressed with this year's version of NC State. Yeah. All right. Here we have a Missouri Valley game. I think Drake was the preseason favorite, but they haven't quite lived up to it. And Indiana State's kind of been one of the big surprise teams this year. Indiana State at Drake. Caleb's going with Drake.
I'm gonna go with Indiana State. I'll be honest, I don't really know much of all about Drake, but I know Indiana State's been playing good basketball. I think they're 13-2 or something like that. And been kind of a, like you said, a surprise. So I'm gonna take Indiana State.
Yeah, Tucker DeVries is not quite, Drake had a bunch of guys that had been there for like forever. And DeVries
Yeah.
kind of didn't have to be the man so much. He had a lot of help. He doesn't have that this year, and he's kind of struggling. Drake just got walloped by Belmont, who might be the second best team in the Missouri Valley. I'm going with Indiana State. All right, so we got Wisconsin at Ohio State. What a great game. This is a tough one. Oh, and Caleb's going with Ohio State.
Oh, this one's tough. I'm gonna take Ohio State.
I am too. I think
Yeah.
Wisconsin is a better team, but man, home court.
Yeah, that's what I was like. They're at Ohio State. If this was at
Right.
Wisconsin, I'd go with the home team and whatever that matchup was.
Right. All right. Now we have Oklahoma at TCU. Caleb's going with OU.
I'm gonna go with TCU here at home. I think we kind of hinted at it. Oklahoma, I think, is playing good basketball, but I don't think they're a top 10 team in the country. I think the Horned Frogs get them here. I think TCU's been kind of quietly really, really solid this year.
Yep.
Like no one's talking about them. I think they've been good.
Yeah, they're not as good as they were with
Miles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Oklahoma's way overrated at number 9. I like the home team. All right, another tough one. We have Florida at Ole Miss.
Ooh. I haven't seen Ole Miss play a lot, to be honest. I've seen a bit of Florida because I always kind of follow Golden just because he was a USF guy.
Right.
So I'm gonna go with Caleb here. I'm gonna go with Florida. I've taken the home team in the last couple of games. Give me Florida here.
I'm sticking with the home team. I'm going with Mississippi. The computers really hate them because they played a pretty light schedule. Florida is a really good team, which I talked about earlier in the show. But I think Mississippi can play better than they did over the weekend. Who gave them a good thrashing? Tennessee. Yeah, I think they bounced back from that thrashing. All right, so we have Michigan State. This is a Thursday game. Michigan State at Illinois. Another tough.
I gotta take Illinois. Michigan State just hasn't shown me any. I cannot trust this team right now. Maybe they get it together. Maybe Izzo figures it out, but they're on the road. Oh, but Illinois does not. Oh, I'm gonna take Illinois. I just can't trust Michigan State. I'm gonna feel a lot dumber if I pick Michigan State and they lose than if I pick Illinois and they lose.
Yeah, man.
But they don't have Terrence.
Yeah, they don't. But nobody's really standing out for Michigan State. I mean, they're just not. We thought that they would be. We knew they didn't have any studs. We knew they didn't have any stars, but we thought the collection of them would just
There'd be enough talent overall.
Yeah, enough talent and depth. But man, they just. Yeah, if they were home, I'd go with Michigan State, but I'm going with a little Illinois. All right, so we got Boise at Nevada, who's only lost one game this year, getting votes for the top 25, and we will soon have a guest coming up from Nevada.
I haven't seen Nevada play. I've seen Boise play a couple of times because they played a handful of WCC teams. I think a Pac-12 team in there, but I'm going to go with Nevada. They're playing good. They're at home. I'll take Nevada and some Mountain West play.
Nevada's tough at home, and I think they're the better team as well. Caleb went with Boise. I got to go with Nevada. All right, now we're moving up as a Friday game. Now we're moving on to Saturday's games. We have St. John's at Creighton.
I'm taking Creighton. St. John's got to fly. He's got to travel a bit of a ways here, and I know Creighton's been up and down. But I still think that they have one of the best starting fives in the country. Like when their top guys are on, they can play with anybody. I think very highly of Shireman, of Alexander, Kalkbrenner. I know Ashworth hasn't really found his footing, but I'm gonna take the Blue Jays here at home.
Yeah, I agree for all the reasons you said. All right, now we have Oklahoma at Kansas. This would be a top 10 matchup.
I'm taking Kansas. I think, like I said, I agree. I think Oklahoma's overrated. And while Kansas is really reliant on their three guys, those three guys have shown up.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, now we have Kentucky at Texas A&M. These two had some great battles last year.
Yeah. This is a good one too. I'll take Kentucky. I think Kentucky's like got the upside to go in there and pull off the upset, but this wouldn't shock me if A&M pulls it out.
I've been thinking for about 2 weeks, one thought, and I can't get it out of my head. Kentucky's going to win the national championship. That's how
Ooh.
much I like these kids. I understand why they're not, like the number one team. They haven't played like it. But man, the talent on this team is just tremendous. I'm going with Kentucky. All right. We have San Diego State versus New Mexico. This is interesting. Jake and preseason favorite was San Diego State in the conference. I went with New Mexico to win the conference. By the way, Caleb is taking New Mexico in the pit.
I like the Aztecs. I've been a fan. I just think that the Aztecs are the type of team where, again, they've had some up and down moments, but I think this team is made of the right stuff. They're a veteran team, veteran coach. They have the ability to go in and gut one out against any team, particularly any team in the Mountain West, in my opinion.
Yeah. As I said, I picked New Mexico to win the conference, and I think they have a ton of talent. They have a nice freshman class. They have some great holdovers. But you know what? Every time I watch this team play, they put up they fall flat in their face. I don't know what it is. I know they've won a lot of games. They just don't do it when I'm watching. They look terrible when I've tuned in. So I'm going with San Diego State. All right, now we have Kansas State at Texas Tech.
I'm taking Texas Tech.
Caleb's going with K-State, by the way.
I think Texas Tech's just the better team, and they're at home. I mean, Kansas State was kind of on our disappointing list, and I think that kind of speaks volumes that one team is kind of borderline receiving votes, and at home versus a team that's been struggling. Give me Tech.
Yeah, I'm going with Tech too. I think these teams, these two teams actually might be fighting for the last spot in the Big 12 to get into the tournament.
Yeah.
Be that 7th or 8th team. But I got to go with Tech at home. Houston at TCU. So Houston's finally starting to play some people.
Yeah. I'm going to take Houston. I think Houston's just the better team. I think TCU is a really solid team, but Houston at home, I'll take Houston.
Yeah, I went against Houston once. I'm not going against them twice. All right. The two teams you're really familiar with.
Very familiar with.
St. Mary's at Santa Clara. Santa Clara is Caleb went with Santa Clara at home.
Yeah, Santa Clara's kind of been the tale of two teams, but so has St. Mary's. And if I'm being honest, St. Mary's they've pulled together a win streak, but outside of Colorado State, they haven't really played anybody during that win streak. Santa Clara started really hot and kind of fell off. I'm gonna go with Santa Clara at home. Just because I think they'll find a way to manufacture enough buckets, and I don't know if St. Mary's will.
Yeah, I'm thinking that this is a battle, in my opinion, the battle for third place in the West Coast Conference. I think Gonzaga's the best, San Francisco's the second best, and then who's the third best is between these two teams. So I'm going to go with the home team, Santa Clara. We have Alabama at Mississippi State. Tulu Smith finally got back on the court this weekend, though Mississippi State lost to South Carolina. Caleb is going with Bama on the road.
Oh, I haven't seen Mississippi State play. I'll take Bama. I'm just more familiar with them. I'll take Bama.
I am going with Mississippi State. I don't trust Alabama, especially on the road. Mississippi State's tough. They're getting Tulu back. I look for him to have a big game against Alabama's super foul-prone front court. All right, here's an interesting one. And by the way, you will be interested to know that Cody Williams might be back for Colorado this week. as soon as Wednesday, I hear.
Mhm.
So we have USC at Colorado. USC has won 2 in a row, by the way.
I'm gonna take Colorado at home. I mean, USC is still, I think, they have the upside. I just don't know if they're ready. I don't know if this team's like in a position right now to rip off like some long-standing win streak, and if Colorado's getting healthy, this was a Colorado team that at one point was ranked in the top 20.
Right.
And I think De Silva is the best player in the game, or has the potential to be the best player in the game.
Right. Yeah. Cody Williams, Simpson, De Silva. That's a fierce trio. And USC can match that trio, but Colorado's home. So now if Cody Williams doesn't play, USC wins, maybe. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't even be surprised if Collier has, like I said, this team lives and dies in Collier. He has a nice game, and they could win. It's a good game. Fun game. Should be good.
Should be a good game.
Yeah. All right. We got 2 Sunday games to finish up with. We got Maryland at Illinois. Caleb's going with Illinois.
This, I think, has a chance to be a big game for Maryland. I know we said that they were struggling, so I'm gonna take them in the upset here, because if Illinois doesn't have their go-to guy, Terrence, Shannon, I think Maryland might be able to pull it out here and have this. This could be a season turner for this team. If we're talking about them maybe getting it right, this might be the game that it happens.
Yeah. I definitely like Illinois if they lose to Michigan State, and which I think there's a good chance. That game to me is a toss-up. So I'm going to go with Illinois here. I think they still have enough at home, to beat Maryland, but it should be close. All right, finally, Utah been playing solid ball, receiving votes for the top 25 versus Stanford at home. Caleb's going with Stanford.
I'm taking Utah. It kind of pains me, but the song and dance with Stanford for the last couple of years of the Haas regime has been pull out a really big win, kind of put it together, or think they're putting it together, and then kind of fall back to earth. And I think Utah's been really, really solid. I think the Pac-12 and I think them and Oregon have been kind of the surprise teams. Like I said, at the beginning of the year, everybody probably thought USC and UCLA were going to fight for that 2-3 spot behind Arizona. And right now it's Utah and Oregon. So I know I spoke highly of Stanford with Carlyle kind of figuring things out. And the Stanford team is talented, but I think Utah is better. And Stanford has a tendency to as they build momentum, let it slip away on a game like this on their home court. That would be another kind of feather in their cap win.
Yeah, Brendan Carlson matching up against Stanford's French center. That's going to be a big matchup.
Yeah.
But I'm going to make a little prediction here. Kanaan Carlyle, the talk of the show today, goes for 25, and Stanford wins at home. All right. So I just want to, by the way, standings. Caleb won over the break. We picked 29 games. And he got 18 out of 29, but I'm still the overall leader. Caleb and Cam are tied at 58%. I'm at 61. Drew had another rough week, but we know he's capable and highly intelligent. So I want to thank Rob for our mailbag question, and I'm sorry to Keon, Vince, and Cody. We'll get to your questions next week, promise. And so, as always, I want to thank all of our listeners, and we don't have a special guest, but we will have a special guest next week, and I know who it is. Trey Mitchell, the center for the team I just said I think is going to win the national championship, the Kentucky Wildcats. So he will be with us next week. And if you ever miss an episode, you can get caught up at hoopsprospects.com. And if you'd like to send us a question for the mailbag, you can email it to admin@hoopsprospects.com. We will also take your questions via social media on Twitter @hoopsprospects, on Instagram @the_Hoops and on Facebook @HoopsPros. As I said, we'll be back next week. Drew and I, and maybe Caleb, maybe Jake, we'll talk more college hoops, and we'll have a guest, maybe 2 guests, because Nevada was talking to me about a guy who has come out of nowhere, Nick Davidson. I can remember saying to their SID, Trevor, and I can't remember Trevor's last name right now. I can't remember anybody's last name today. But Trevor, I remember saying toward the end, I think it was during the Mountain West tournament, I was basically bashing Will Baker, the former McDonald's All-American who's played for a million schools. Baker's now at LSU. He transferred again. And I was saying, you know what? I don't know who that kid is, but that kid who just like bangs and works really hard, I like him a lot. I'd rather see him get more playing time over Baker. And it turns out that Nick Davidson is getting a lot of playing time this year, and he actually can do more than just hustle. He can play basketball. He's a good basketball player, and he's been one of the best players in the Mountain West. So he's going to be joining us sometime soon. So, Drew, any final thoughts before we say goodnight?
Nothing too crazy. I did have my rough week last week. I was 14-15, so I wasn't egregiously bad. And folks, it's college basketball. It's been a crazy year. There's been a lot of upsets this year, so bear with me here. I have a heater inside me. Maybe it's this week, maybe it's next. I don't know when it's gonna happen. But
it happened week one. You blew us all away.
Week one, I had a great week.
Yeah.
But you know what? Even though for my predictions percentage isn't phenomenal. And
you're right. You're right there.
Yeah, I'm like, Cam, I love you, man, but you've only picked 28 games. I'm up to like
72.
Probably 72. So 72. Percentage is a little skewed.
And you know, those guys are at 58%. You're at 56. So it's not like they're blowing you away. This is a race. Last year, I kind of jumped. I was near 70% most of the year, and nobody really got close to me. This year, it's more competitive. So, yeah, good on you.
But yeah, it's me being wrong on these predictions means the sport's in a good place because it means there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of parity. It means basketball's in a place where we're not, all our college football where it's 5 teams run the table and everyone else is playing catch up. It's a good place to be, and it's why college basketball is the best sporting league in the world, man. At least to my pretty biased opinion.
We also pick games 2.5 weeks into the future. We picked from mid-December all the way up to like January 2nd. So that's a long way to project games.
Totally.
So I expected us to all have kind of rough percentages over that long break. All right, so it's good to be back. I'm glad the holidays are over now. I just gotta hire some kids to like put all this Christmas shit away. Ho ho ho. All right, Drew. Good seeing you. Good night, folks.